Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I am glad that you guys can join me wherever you are under the sound of this voice. I appreciate you being under the sound of this voice because you could be anywhere. You could be at home. You could be having sex with your girlfriend, wife, mistress, etc., etc. No shame is being thrown on whatever you're doing. I'm just pointing out you could be anywhere and you are under this voice. And I appreciate you for being under this voice. Thank you for joining me. If you are on the East Coast, good morning. If you are on, I don't know the name of the time zone. Okay, I'll just say if you're in a different part of the world, welcome and good evening. Thank you all for joining me. We have a damn good show for you today. We're going to have Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich has a show called The Burning Archive. I love that channel. Dimitri Lascaris, he's going to be on the show. Reason to Resist is the name of his YouTube channel. Dimitri is fantastic. He's been very good to this channel, and he's been one of those people that have shown up very often. And he has my deepest appreciation for doing so. We are also going to have KJ No. KJ No has become a fan favorite. I will tell you, one of my pet loves is when a guest comes on the show and the guest starts off with like 1,000, let's say 1,000 views. And then over the course of time, let's say over 6 months, a year, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Like you can literally see the guests tick up where the audience just ends up loving the guest. And it's one of those people that grows with the show. I love it. I love it. I love it. Dr. Wilmer Leon is another one like that, where I remember one day Dr. Wilmer was on the show and somebody said, Dr. Leon, I'm out. And I'm like, what the hell? The man is a fantastic guest. And now if you look at him, he's like 10,000 views. Sarah Bills, another one. Shot up like a rocket. People love it when she comes on. Brian Berletic is going to be on the show next week. He's going to be on Monday. So definitely look forward to that. That's going to be a power show. It's going to be Brian, Mark. I need to figure out who I'm going to get to round that show out because that is going to be a powerful show. But either way, I'm glad that you guys can join me today. A lot of interesting news. I'm going to save the monologue for 9 o'clock because I'm going to cut that. But suffice to say, Donald Trump is running a shadow war under the war. And yes, I've said that before. I've been more right on this stuff than most, even on the radio show. There are times where I would say, I'm not sure. When Donald Trump first got into office, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I find that to be a strength, not a weakness. The reason I find it to be a strength, because I don't want to be cynical. I don't want to take a perspective. Cynical people take certain perspectives, but they're just as bad as people who are trusting of everything. Because if your point of view is always set, then that's not really analysis. That's just cynicism masquerading as analysis. From my point of view, I'm willing to be open to see what happens. I don't necessarily want to take a negative approach to it, even if my point of view may be doubtful. In Trump's case, when he first got into office, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. All right, he wants to be a man of peace. He's holding a dove and a rose and lily in one hand, and he's going out there to the world. Let's see it. If he indeed believes in multipolarity, let's see it. You got space to run, go, have at it, run through the daisies. That's not what happened. That's decisively not what happened. And I understand that there may be certain people who want to still continue to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. I think those people are wrong. I think Trump is not a bright man. It's not like he reads. They may have put some of these, files and cartoons that Donald Trump flipped through, but I would imagine that this is not necessarily something that he's all that much paying attention to. He is surfing the waves of whatever is taking place, and these things are just tactics. A weak man who doesn't want to look like he lost a war. And inevitably, he has lost the war. It doesn't matter one way or the other. Donald Trump is running a shadow war under the actual war that he is actually presiding over. And he is trying to pretend as if he is not presiding over a war and still trying to send it as if it is Joe Biden's war. Sir, it is not. It is yours. You had the opportunity to walk. The first 20 days, first week, month, first 2 months, hell, first 3 months. You could have said, you know what? I'm out. Joe Biden's war, his fault. And left. Weapons never stopped. Joe Biden, before Joe Biden left, got $60 billion where weapons could be sent to Ukraine. Donald Trump now is sending weapons. Europe and those stupid idiots are supposedly going to pay for it, some of them anyway. Some of the countries apparently found that the jig was up and was like, wait a minute, I think we're being taken advantage of. Yes, you're being taken advantage of on so many levels. To put this in perspective, the United States blew up Nord Stream pipeline. Nord Stream pipeline was supplying energy to Europe. There's that. That means that Europe has to buy energy from the United States now for 5 times more. There's that. If you're a business, whatever you're producing as a business, imagine your expenses from a standpoint of energy going up 5 times. Okay, what does that do to your business? Can you stay in business under that model, especially if you're dealing in the world economy where you have other companies in other countries that don't have to pay 5 times more for energy? You go bankrupt, you go belly up. Some countries can tolerate it, most cannot. So right off the bat, the people in your country are now paying more for energy. And the US is like, yes, because they're going to buy some of that from us. We're going to charge them 5 times more. This is great. Then from the standpoint of weapons, you had the situation where Joe Biden was just giving them weapons. Okay. But Donald Trump is like, well, I don't want to give you weapons. I want to sell you weapons. So now these expensive weapons that are coming from the United States, Europe is supposedly paying for them. Supposedly paying for them. Right here. This is Callas. Listen to what she says here. It's like, hey, I think you're taking advantage of us. Now, she doesn't really say it, but it's there. Listen to Callas. I think this woman is very attractive, even though she is dumb as a box of rocks. I want to let her play out. She says things. That's why I'm saying that.
Well, if we pay for these weapons, it's our support. So it's European support. And we are doing as much as we can to help Ukraine. And therefore, the call is that that everybody would do the same. It's, if you promise to give the weapons, but say that somebody else who is going to pay for it, it's not really given by you, is it?
Hey, you got that right, Callas. That's the first thing that she has ever said out of her mouth that has ever made 1 ounce of sense. First time. I'm going to save that. I'm going to bookmark that because that is the first time a beautiful woman has ever said anything of worth and of value. Hey, we have to buy weapons from you. So not only is money fleeing out of Europe from the standpoint of energy, not only are businesses going belly up or for that matter moving to the United States, but now Trump has come up with a mechanism where we will sell you weapons. You will buy those weapons. And that money will come from you to us to give to Ukraine. Feels like a tax scheme, like tax fraud, right? You're taking money from the Europeans and effectively giving it to America. And you're doing so in a war that you know you lost. In a war that you know you lost. So I hope, I'm trying to make this clear how wild this is. That the Europeans are effectively allowing this to take place. Now, some European states are saying we're not doing that. Hungary is like, I'm not doing that. France has even come out and said, we're not doing that. Because what France recognizes, you're damaging Europeans' ability to make our own weapons. Now, understand, part of what Europe wants to do and part of the reason and rationale that Europe is continuing this war is not because they believe that the war is won, or for that matter, that they believe they can win the war. They believe that they can feed Ukrainians to a Russian wood chipper. And if you can feed enough of them, it's almost like it takes, let's say, in a theoretical model or a hypothetical model, because people use theory wrong, the term wrong. In a hypothetical model, let's say you're forecasting as Europeans, and you say to yourself, every Ukrainian that dies, that we feed to a wood chipper, gives us 5 minutes. And you forecast that out and say, how many Ukrainians do we need to feed to a wood chipper if it takes 5 minutes for the Ukrainian to be killed, for us to build up our own military, our own European military, our own weapons productions, our own weapons industry? How long would it take to do that? Now, if Donald Trump is saying we're going to give you weapons and sell you weapons, well, what does that do to your own capability of making those weapons? Well, it kills it. It kills it, right? So France is like, we're not damaging our own weapons industry. If we're going to get weapons, we're going to get them from ourselves. Okay. Other European states are not necessarily saying that. Mark Rutte is not saying that. Mark Rutte is like, daddy is back. Now, to be fair, Joe Biden gave $60 billion. Trump is not giving that much money, nor is he giving them any weapons. But in some respects, it's because he does not have those weapons to give in the first place, because they have been effectively giving these weapons out to Ukraine already over the course of the 3 years for Joe Biden. So the Guardian article that pointed out that the United States is down to 25% weapons production in regards to Patriot missiles. Okay, that's a big deal, right? What it means is that we're in a new phase of warfare. And much of this warfare is being fought with drones. And yes, there are hypersonic missiles on the battlefields now, but that also means that there are drones, missiles, ballistic. And with drones, they're cheap, they're inexpensive. And if you're spending $1 million to take down something that costs $25,000 to build, you can imagine that the logistics in regards to the cost gets very messy, very fast. Add to that the United States weapon production is not what it was in the Second World War. So your ability to pump these things out is diminished by the number of stuff that can be sent up into the air that those air defense missiles need to take down. If you're Russia and you're sending 500, 700,000 drones or 700 drones into the air at once, what does it mean for your air defense, right? What does it mean for your air defense? Donald Trump, as we know, has put out an ultimatum to Russia. Russia's told him to kick rocks. Putin hasn't even responded. Medvedev, who I consider to be the actual voice of Russia, came out with his statement. And I will go with that statement because I think that statement is probably the one that's more honest and more accurate. Medvedev points out right here, this. Trump issued a decorative ultimatum to Kremlin. The world shuddered, awaiting consequences. The militant European Union is disappointed. Russia didn't notice. Effectively, we don't care. We don't care. We don't care. Do what you will, we don't care. And in order to make it clear that they don't care, Russia continued bombing like it was Tuesday, because it is in fact, today's Wednesday. They kept bombing like it was Wednesday. And this is effectively what they did to, where is it? Right here. This is what they thought of Trump's ultimatum. Apparently they were 20 strikes in this location. Apparently Zelensky's hometown. Here's another one that took place in Kharkov, Ukraine. And Donald Trump himself, based on what Politico is saying, knows that the war is lost. Right here. Trump still believes Moscow has the upper hand. Well, that's an understatement. According to senior White House official, but his frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin has grown. He's more willing to take part in the conflict. He insisted he could settle quickly. Quote, the president's view is that Russia is going to win. It's a matter of how long it takes. Senior White House official granted anonymity to discuss the president's thinking. Quote, Russia has the bigger economy, the bigger military, has more than enough bodies to throw into the meat grinder. It's not a meat grinder for the Russians. Ukrainians have lost like 1 million people. Russia has lost maybe 100,000 over the course of the entire war. There's enough bodies thrown into the meat grinder, and it just doesn't care. That part is correct. It doesn't care. It's accomplishing its military objectives. The point that's interesting is that Trump knows that they've lost. And yet, Trump has taken upon himself to enter into the conflict as opposed to calling it a day and walking. That should sink in, right? You know you lost and you keep going. And the operative question becomes, why are you continuing to put people into a war that you know in your heart of hearts, 3 a.m. between you and your God, that you lost? You're just feeding people into a meat grinder in a lost conflict. I want to go to my guests. I am joined with the man himself. Fantastic show, The Burning Archive, Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich is an author, historian, podcaster who worked for 33 years in government. He's now retired, but he currently lives in Melbourne. I think I got that right. Australia.
Melbourne.
Say it for me one more time.
Melbourne.
Okay, Melbourne.
Oh,
I have an American, I have an American accent. Forgive me. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give context to changing world. You can find Jeff on YouTube on The Burning Archive and on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. Jeff, I would tell you, I say it every time you come in, you have a fantastic channel, man. I don't tell it to everybody. I tell it to you. It is
Thank
great.
you, Jamal. Thank you, Jamal.
Let's talk multipolarity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Donald Trump when he first came in the office, he freaked out Europe. And part of the reason that he freaked Europe out is because he came across as if he was giving up this notion of multipolarity. I'm saying he was embracing this notion of multipolarity, that the unipolar moment has ended. The unipolar moment is expensive. So we don't want to deal with the unipolar moment. We want to deal with multipolarity. And I'm calling BS on that. Mm-hmm. Trump is not into multipolarity. Nobody who has a tariff war against the world is into multipolarity. What Donald Trump wants to do is realizing that the United States doesn't have the capability of being at every hotspot around the world at once. Meaning you can attack one country, but then the other countries are going to grow. And so you need to find a way to hit China, Russia, Iran, and hit them at once. And you can't do that as America because you don't have the resources to do it. So what Trump wants to do is diversify resources, kind of like the Romans, bringing in, the quote unquote barbarians in order to expand and maintain its empire. That's what it seems like he's trying to do. I want Europe to take on Russia. I want Israel to take over the Middle East, and we will go after China. That's not multipolarity. That's unipolarity, using other countries to help diversify your unipolarity. Give me your take on this, though. You're a historian. You're a doctor, Dr. Rich.
Yeah. I agree with you because it's like calling in the assets. Like I think I've been saying for a couple of years on my show and interviews and things that, in a way, the US has been in this dilemma for a couple of years now, where it feels it's got too big of an empire, doesn't want to pay for it all, and it's a bit resentful about all the obligations, and so it's calling in the assets, calling in debts. Saying, it's your time to die now, guys. And it's done that with Europe. Pete Hegseth came in as, true sort of debt collector style, and, JD Vance sort of beat him up verbally as well. And then they're doing it with Australia. And the funny thing is, the allies like Australia are so sort of emotionally, psychologically, ideologically committed to the whole idea of the US empire that they want the US to succeed. So they say, yes, American primacy should continue, and so yes, we will do more, and yes, we will call you daddy. So I feel that is absolutely the sort of dynamic that's going on. It is a kind of we can't pay for it all, so we've got to continue. And when I almost called him Marco Rubio. Did that interview with, the journalist whose name I forgot, Megyn Kelly. Like, it was his first interview as Secretary of State in the first couple of days. And this is where he said, yes, it's a multipolar world now. And everyone got all excited, and all the people in the alternative media who really wanted to believe that, Donald Trump was a peace president and all this sort of stuff, said Marco Polo said it's a multipolar world. Did I say Marco Polo? Marco Rubio. And but I remember I did a show at that time because there was a whole report on multipolarity that was prepared for the Munich Security Dialogue, I think, this year, about different attitudes and sort of kind of offering various sophisticated reasons why it really won't be a multipolar world. But I described the way in which Marco Rubio described and Donald Trump thought about multipolarity as, yes, there are other powers in the world, but America has all the power and they have all the responsibility. So, it's not actually about, even fair distribution of power, reflecting resources, capabilities, talents, that sort of thing. It's about, yes, we acknowledge you exist. We can't not acknowledge you exist because, we buy half of our goods from you and all this sort of thing. But we get to set the rules and you do what what we tell you to do, sort of thing. So it's a very distorted concept of multipolarity. And then people would turn it into this sort of, return to the great powers of the late 19th century sort of world, the sort of concert of Europe and spheres of influence and all this kind of thing. And again, that was sort of a bit of a projection, really, because at that time it was the US going to Europe and saying, you might think that you're independent countries, but we're going to tell you how much you spend on defence and where you spend it and, which wars you fight. And, we're going to force, weird trade agreements on you, and we're going to defy, resist any attempts you have to control our tech industries and AI and all this sort of thing. So it was always multipolarity from a sort of unilateral sort of perspective. So it met a very, very, very low bar of accepting that there were other people, in the room, but not treating them with respect. And like you even get that with, Trump's demeanor with other, journalists and leaders from, around the world, like the Liberian president or leader, I'm not quite sure what his official title was, who met with him, and he says, you speak very good English. It's sort of like, oh my God, this is some caricature from the 1960s, isn't it?
It's like nobody even briefed him. Like, that's the wild part, right? He just doesn't care. And that's the humiliation. Like, that is so humiliating. Like, I admit, even if the president is incompetent, I want the president to have a bottom level of competence. Meaning, I want the president to be brief, to know that these were slaves that came from America, and so of course they speak English. Like, that's what I want. That's not what you get with Trump. Trump doesn't read. Trump doesn't know this stuff. And you said something else, a distorted concept of multipolarity. I think we are in for chaos. And what I mean by that is the US may have that concept of multipolarity. It doesn't mean anybody else has accepted. There's an interregnum that seems to be taking place in regards to world order. And in the context of that interregnum, it is chaos. It's one world that seems to be not saying, effectively, we don't accept your point of view. That's your point of view, man. And at some point, that has to be reconciled in order for a world on some level to be stable. Like, if you're talking about like the old great power conflicts of Europe, Europe keeps bringing us into world wars. And a part of that is because there's a disagreement. Like, if you and I are playing chess, there may be a certain part of the board where we both just agree upon. It gets interesting when we disagree on the game. When there's something happening in the game space that we just fundamentally disagree upon, and we're fighting over that because we have a disagreement over the thing that we're fighting on. That's the imbalance in the position that we're effectively using to try to win. I'm saying that's kind of where our world is today. The United States is coming up with this weird, distorted image of multipolarity of, we accept this multipolarity, but we still get to tell you what to do. And the other countries are like, no,
Yeah.
you don't. It doesn't.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. And look,
Give me
I mean,
your take on
that's grounded in the whole historical experience of the United States since 1945. Really, since it like the rest of the world is a bombed out city. Not my words of a very distinguished historian to describe what the sort of literal but also metaphorical state of the world was. And America's, got this preponderance of power, this preponderance of military, preponderance of economic influence, and also just the morale sort of thing. I'll just sort of adjust my camera a little bit.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It was just pointing a bit too far down there. So I had another camera set up, and it was messing with my microphone. So I don't know. I had to make a last minute change, Jamal. But
You're perfectly fine. You are perfectly fine. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So, it's had 80 years of sort of reinforcing feedback that it really could make unilateral decisions, and it really could get away with it. But that's just not the case anymore. And it's not just China who's talking back. It's not just, Russia that's talking back. Even some people in Europe are ever so quietly sort of starting to talk back, ever so late starting to talk back. I saw a report today that, like Indonesia's joined the BRICS, various tariffs have been put on Indonesia.
Yeah.
Australia's nearest neighbour, largest Muslim country in the world, extraordinary place.
Yeah.
And, their foreign minister basically said, well, tariffs, it's just the price we pay for sovereignty. So get stuff for the United States. And what's more, their energy minister has said, well, maybe we just won't import any American energy goods because, if you don't want to trade fair with us, we just won't trade with you. So, and, Indonesia has still got a lot of poor people. In the 1990s, the IMF and the United States almost, inflicted these punitive IMF rules during the Asian financial crisis on Indonesia, which created, a lot of suffering, a lot of poverty. So the fact that Indonesia is sort of having the confidence, the diplomatic confidence, its president was sitting next to Vladimir Putin at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum the other day. So Indonesia is just saying, you don't get to set the rules, you don't get to tell us what to do anymore. It's a different kind of world. So it's, and you use the chess example, and I think one of the things about American foreign policy thinking is it tends to be dualistic. It tends to be good versus evil, democracies versus autocracies, challenger versus hegemon in the whole sort of realist sort of school stuff, the Thucydides trap and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality of the kind of game that's played in world geopolitics, especially when, it's a more equally balanced multipolar world, is it's not a 1v1 game anymore. It's I don't know how many players. I'd say there's at least 5 major states of Russia, China, US, Europe, and India. But Indonesia's becoming a player. All these sort of middle powers are becoming players. They're acting together in organisations like BRICS and like Shanghai Cooperation and finding points of leverage to exercise more influence. So it's not just when the United States says, I'm going to move to this place on the board, they can't just think about what, let's say the black pieces are going to do, they have to look around, they have to look, all around and say, well, what are these people going to do as well? And it's just not playing out, I guess, the way they're expecting.
See, I think you're right. I think it is a Thucydides trap, but I don't think it's. And initially, I used to think it was going to be Thucydides trap between countries. I just don't think it was working in the context of countries. I think it's working in the context of there's the West, led by the U.S., daddy, in charge of the West, and then there's everyone else. And everyone else is looking for a new way to reshape the way the world is organized. And the U.S. is not liking it, and it's rubbing up against that because it doesn't want to accept this idea of saying, okay, the world doesn't want a hegemon. The world doesn't want a rules-based order. It wants rules. It wants honest engagement. It wants, if a country is committing a genocide, it wants to be able to say, hey, that's a genocide that needs to stop. It doesn't want the U.S. putting its thumb on the ICC or putting its thumb on the OPCW. Like, it doesn't want that stuff. It's looking for something else. I got to get to Australia.
Oh, yeah.
So the U.S., and because this feeds right into the conversation, the U.S. goes to Australia and South Korea, says, hey, if and when there is a war with China, we need you to figure out whose side you're going to be on, and you need to tell us now. Now, this is fascinating for South Korea, because South Korea went through a coup attempt. I mean, for God's sake, Yoon Suk Yeol tried to literally overthrow the government, potentially disappear his political rivals, blame North Korea for it in order to take dictatorial powers. And, there was a question of whether or not that was taking place because the U.S. would have absolute control of the South Korean military in case of a military conflict. And at the exact same time, there was talk about North Korea fighting in the war with Russia. So the thought became, okay, is the U.S. disbelieving in South Korean democracy that it will go along with it because it's a democracy? And so now the mask is off. What you going to do, Australia and South Korea? Are you going to back us in a war?
Yeah.
Is Australia going to be fed to the wood chipper of the Chinese? What do you think?
Well, it does. There's a lot of pressure being placed, literally through this Elbridge Colby, the Deputy Defence Secretary. I can't remember whether he's the son or grandson of a former CIA director, but he's kind of this CIA dynastic family, which is a pretty weird concept in itself.
Yeah, right.
So reportedly he has asked, I think there's some kind of public pressure being placed on the Australian government to commit to use the nuclear submarines that we're getting through AUKUS, which is the big nuclear submarine deal, in a conflict with Taiwan. Now, at some level, what the hell else are we meant to do with them? Because the criticism of them, of this AUKUS deal, which has been very controversial in Australia, has always been that the real purpose of these nuclear submarines is not really to defend the coastline of Australia, which, the submarines don't have to travel that far and all this sort of stuff. Their real purpose is to sit, down in the South China Sea and threaten China as part of a conflict over Taiwan. But Elbridge Colby is sort of reportedly, at least, making that a lot more explicit, and it's actually just a ratcheting up of the pressure that has been going on for years and years and years, and which actually includes, in a way, the AUKUS deal, because Australia made a decision to spend this ridiculous amount of money. It's like, getting up to $400 billion to buy submarines. We get like a couple of second-hand ones sometime in the 2030s, and then I think the first real ones we get in the 2040s, and then maybe there's a few more in the 2050s. By which time, if America has its way, we'll all be dead anyhow. But so already in making that decision, it's significantly compromised its sort of sovereignty, and what the United States partly got for that deal was, apart from the money going into their, submarine building industries, it got access to port nuclear submarines in its war with China in Australian ports, in a port in Perth, in the Indian Ocean, part of the Indo-Pacific. And so in a way, already with that AUKUS decision, it has, Australia's been pushed further and further into this conflict with China, which is, there's no real strategic purpose for Australia to, fight to the death over Taiwan. It's really only about preserving the symbolic presence, I guess, of the United States there to keep China divided and to keep the sort of Western Pacific being a sort of, US military zone of dominance.
Well, Oh, please, no, I'm sorry. Please finish. I'm sorry.
Oh, and I was just going to say, there was one of Biden's foreign policy teams, this really odious character called Kurt Campbell, years ago said, part of the point of these deals, and AUKUS was, negotiated under Biden, was, to force Australia to get off the fence, to force Australia to choose, America in a conflict with China, which is, just simply not in our interests, really, in any way.
No.
And there's increasing pushback in Australia about it.
Yeah.
But the Colby stuff has been interesting because a lot of these sort of elite sort of commentators in the foreign policy strategy sort of space have kind of made this argument about the Elbridge-Colby thing of, it's going to backfire, don't you realise? Because what you're doing is you're putting the political leadership in a difficult position. If you had just kept quiet about it, we would have got you there. We would have made the commitment privately, but now you've made it really hard for us, and it makes it harder for us to make the case for Australia to be the next true. Ukraine in the South Pacific.
Well, is that true though? Like, is Australia? Australia is odd to me. For one, it's a beautiful country, so there's that.
Yeah.
Two, the overwhelming majority of the people in Australia, when you're looking at the polling, would say, well, China is our number one trading partner. Yeah. Everything's great. But the same token, it's like, okay, but now they're talking about getting submarines to defend themselves from their number one trading partner. Australia is like 70% trade between the two countries.
Yeah.
So would the population support a war against China for the United States?
There has been a sort of massive, information campaign, if you like, particularly over the last, since about 2016, 2017. There were a few cases of, and it was in that period where, China was being accused of wolf warrior diplomacy, things like that. There were, conflicts over sort of climate change agenda, and there were.
War?
Sorry?
And that should lead to war? We don't like your climate change.
Well, no, it's just the climate of opinion really turned very sharply in Australia. I saw you had Jerry Gray on the show last night, Australian time, and he sort of commented on this too. There was this really sharp shift of opinion where, John Howard, Conservative Prime Minister from 96 to 2007 or something, one of the longest serving prime ministers in Australia, always used to say, and very loyal ally to the United States. He was actually in America, when the 9/11 events happened, and was straight on the phone to George W. Bush and all this sort of thing, invoked the sort of alliance defence treaty between Australia and the United States so that we were protecting America from whoever perpetrated that attack. And he would say, Australia doesn't have to choose between United States and China. It's our major economic partner, and America's our major security partner, but also our major sort of capital provider, like major financial investor kind of thing. So big concern during the financial crisis was the money would stop flowing in from the USA. But that really turned in the late 2010s, and it was increasing pressure, including from people like John Mearsheimer, that Australia couldn't exercise a choice about this. That
really,
when the bottom line, America would insist that you're either basically you're with us or against us, and security trumps economics. And it sort of it's created quite a bit of internal tension within Australia. And then, of course, we had COVID and, all the weird international politics and the different responses around all of that. And we've had a series of, pretty alarmist media campaigns about red alerts. There have been a few cases of politicians and intellectuals of various kind being perhaps a little bit too closely associated with lobbying groups from China and things like that. So there's been a real.
To interrupt. I have to interrupt on this. I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's say there is a lobbying group from China.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But the United States is effectively asking Australians to die on its behalf.
Yeah, it's appalling. Effectively, they're asking us to make a preemptive declaration of war against our major trading partner at some unspecified point in the future, regardless of our regardless of our
trading interests.
Our real interests. And there has been quite a lot of pushback. Like, Gareth Evans, who's a former foreign minister, has said, this is just not appropriate. The former head of the Foreign Affairs Department, Peter Varghese, has published a piece in the leading, like the Wall Street Journal of Australia kind of thing. He published a piece that was headlined, if I was running DFAT, I'd ask Elbridge Colby to kill the AUKUS deal because it's useless for us, But he's also of the ilk who says, you're making it harder for us to make the case to support the US alliance within Australia. There isn't a whole lot of questioning of the US alliance itself, but there is a bit of a move to, cancel AUKUS or distance from AUKUS or all that sort of thing. But it is quite outrageous. But it's part of the. Part of the dilemma of being a, kind of a semi-colonized or country in a way, like America does. That they complain about Chinese influence in certain places, but the extent of American penetration of elite opinion and think tanks and all the rest of it is truly astonishing. There's the interpenetration of the media elites. There's, all these sort of, friendly associate, like, the politicians go over and visit other politicians over in Washington sort of thing. I don't quite know how to describe these kind of organizations, but There's a lot of what you could almost describe it as grooming behaviour of young political leaders to pledge their lives, or at least the lives of their fellow Australians, to the American alliance.
It's like grooming.
Well, I mean, you get scholarships, and then you get trips, and then like a couple of years ago, a major politician in Australia published his sort of diaries, and he described all the extensive operations of the various American diplomats and intelligence officials in terms of quite club room discussions with various politicians. And
what is China's relationship with Australia in a diplomatic sense?
At a diplomatic sense, well, it has been quite good, and in fact, the Australian Prime Minister Albanese has just been he's in China right now. He's just met with Xi Jinping, and that's actually part of an annual leaders forum that's occurred between Australia and China since about like 2012 or something like that. So, over 10 years now. It's probably interrupted with COVID and all that sort of thing, but it's pretty much been operating since then. Very deep trade relationships, very deep political leadership connections. Back in the 80s and 90s when George Bush the Elder was in charge of the United States, there was this guy called Bob Hawke, who was a kind of a legendary Australian Prime Minister, who was very close to the Americans, but he was also very close to the Chinese leadership, and he helped, to some degree, accelerate Australia's economic engagement with China back in the 80s, to really sort of open Australia up as a trading partner to, at the time when China was just starting to, open up to the world and begin its sort of various economic and other reforms. And that really laid the groundwork for a very close economic relationship, but also a political relationship that was actually advantageous to the Americans, because the American president and secretary of state would actually use Hawke and some of the other ministers as go-betweens or key advisors on how to manage this absolutely critical relationship with China. So it has been very, very good. There's deep cultural ties. There's, a huge people-to-people ties, like the second largest migrant group in Australia, and a very large proportion of Australia's population are migrants or children of migrants. The second largest group is, Chinese people, and then it's India. Like the top is Britain, but that's partly a historic thing, and then yes. China is getting closer and closer to number one. So there's a deep social and cultural ties, but over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the security concerns of the United States, as it's got more anxious about its control of hegemony, have pressured Australia more and more and more down this sort of conflict and competition route with China. And amongst the elite decision makers, politically, you do better in Australian politics if you get on with the Americans, and you also in the sort of defence and security world, the American alliance brings Australians, outsized influence, outsized sense of power. We have this big surveillance base, intelligence surveillance base in the middle of Australia called Pine Gap, which reportedly is used to do a lot of the, targeting of operations all around the world, and is part of the whole satellite surveillance sort of business. And Australian officials boast of their capabilities with cyber attacks and all that sort of stuff. Being part of the Five Eyes helps give political leaders a sense of we're more important than other people in the world. So there's all these things that just sort of push people in different ways. But the relationship has stabilised a bit over the last few years, and that was partly what's happened with this most recent meeting with Albanese and Xi Jinping. And it also occurred...
They didn't give Eldridge an answer. Like, they didn't give him a yes or no, or did they?
No, but there was I don't think I actually have it with me straight away. But in the the readouts of the meeting, there is a pretty clear statement that Australia supports the One China policy and all that sort of thing, and Australia's position has been that. And there are a lot of people in Australia who just think it's madness for America to pursue this, that they won't win, that they probably know that. They might be posturing, maybe, but who knows whether the Americans are really making genuine rational calculations, I guess.
I don't know if rationality is a word that can be used in a lot of this.
Well, no.
This is, as KJ said, fight the bear fallacy. That he said 5% of Americans think they can fight and beat a bear with their bare hands.
Absolutely. Well, the Australian equivalent, of course, is a lot of people come to Australia, love the beaches, hop into the beautiful surf, and then before they know it, they're in too deep and they've been pulled out by a rip or whatever kind of thing and get sort of drowned. Yeah. And, it's a bit like that with some of these sort of forces of international politics, I think, for America as well. It's totally confident that if it, jumps in, it can swim as far as it wants to. But the ocean's a very powerful force.
Yes. It's wow. How do you see this in a historical context? Is this just desperation masquerading as like bluster, masquerading as desperation? Because it seems to be happening on multiple fronts.
I'm very influenced by sort of Emmanuel Todd's who's a French historian who's written this book, Defeat of the West. And, his comment is that, in a way, Trump is both a symptom, but also a accelerant of a kind of a sense of resentment from America, that it's not, as Donald Trump himself used to say, America doesn't win anymore kind of thing. Wait,
real quick, the resentment at who?
At the rest of the world for catching up, or the rest of the world for ripping America off, or Europe for, bludging off the. Is that that might be an Australian slang term? Bludging being, sort of.
Taking advantage.
Yeah. I think there is that sort of sense of resentment, but I also feel it's just like it's a little bit trapped in its overextension, and it's become an uncontrollable machine in a way that it's just very, very hard to turn around. But there are so many weaknesses in it now, you just can't see how it can't start to bleed away. But I think it will ultimately require some sort of, this is, one of my darker thoughts. It's ultimately going to have to have a significant, military defeat.
Yeah.
To start to make some recalculations.
Is Ukraine enough of that?
Look, it could be.
Because
I mean,
it's like resentment. Like NATO is a power projection device for the U.S. and Europe. Meaning we like NATO because we can project power in Europe. So it's like, how can we be resentful for Europe for allowing us to be a hegemon and use Europe for that? Like, meaning you may be right, you may be resentment, but it's pretty rich.
But it comes out in the you don't pay enough. Europe is these lazy effete people who don't spend enough on defence, and they indulge themselves with things that most states in the world developed in the 20th century, which social security systems and healthcare systems, and quality education systems, things like that. And America doesn't have that, so
America chose not to have it. And
the life expectancy difference between Europe and America is 4 to 5 years. I mean, obviously it's a bit varied across the different states of Europe as it is across the different parts of the United States. But 4 to 5 years is quite a bit,
But we chose those things. Like, that's the part that gets me, right? It's like, if you're going to be resistant. And this is why China is aggravated with the U.S. in many respects. Like, if you ever hear Chinese people talk about it, they're like, it's like, oh, you're ripping us off. It's like, dude, we used the money that we got through business deals to build our country. We built our education, we built our science, we built our technology, we built schools, education, we gave the money back into the public. You guys gave it to oligarchs. And now you're screaming at other people because you chose to give money to oligarchs who chose to buy boats and second houses and took vacations all across the world and everything else. Like, that's a bit rich. I don't know. I just find it to be a bit rich. You could be right. It could be resentment.
Yeah, totally. And look, I was having a conversation with someone the other day where I said, in some ways, America at the moment reminds me a little bit like Britain in the 1920s.
Yeah.
So in the 1920s, it actually, that is the point at which the British Empire reaches its, maximum extent, including places like Australia, which were, like Australia became an independent country in 1901, but it was still like a dominion of the British Empire, and both mentally and in various political ways, like in foreign policy, the foreign policy was set by the British Empire. With some level, there's always negotiation, but it was a kind of a semi-autonomous sort of country. And in particular, it's then that Britain moves into, the Middle East. After the Ottoman Empire collapses, Britain and France sort of divide up the Middle East, Sykes-Picot and all this sort of stuff. And Iran gets the oil, blah 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 blah, and also is keen on attacking the Soviet Union from the south through the Black Sea and all that sort of thing. So, but it's also in this period where its cruelty in India goes up because there's significant resistance to Britain in India. Gandhi, salt marches, the independence movement, that kind of stuff. Australia's getting stroppy, or obstreperous. And so the hold of the British Empire on things is getting weaker. And America, it's also fundamentally indebted after World War One. And so the United States has become, by that point, the sort of superstate in the world, partly on the basis of the sort of World War One debts. So, if you like, there's this sort of point of maximum power, which is also the point where it all starts crumbling, and that then reaches the what people call the strategic abyss of the British Empire, really in World War II, which is 37 to 1942, particularly 1942, because 1942 is where Singapore falls. It's a very significant event in sort of Australian foreign policy history. But Singapore falling means Britain's basically lost its Asian empire, including, it's forced to concede treaty ports in China, it's forced to concede ultimate independence to India, and even loyal little places like Australia start to say, oh, maybe we'll look to America for our security now rather than Britain because, the Brits are useless. So, in a way, I feel America in this, and Trump has even said he wants to see America expand again in the context of, Canada and Greenland and Panama and all that sort of thing. Certainly expand in terms of its economic power, reverse all the trends of recent times. So I almost feel it's sort of like a similar point of expanding beyond their capacity to actually manage it these days, or to keep the whole show together. And increasingly, all those tensions are starting to, bubble over, partly because of the crudity of Trump's tactics and methods. But, that crudity also just reflects the culture. I mean, is he any cruder than Lindsey Graham? Is he any cruder than JD Vance? Is he any cruder than Anthony Blinken or Victoria Nuland? Or, they're all pretty crude. Joe Biden says he'd like to destroy Russia. It's all pretty,
Presidents used to be more polished than that. If you think, go back to Obama for a moment, Obama was polished. He was, granted, there were certain cultural reasons, as an African-American, you can't act in a way that a white man can act. And I know that sounds strange, but it's true in a cultural sense in America. You don't want to be an angry black man. And so Obama, from his point of view, every time you saw him, he was no drama Obama. He was polished. Now, the reality of it is, as a president, he probably could have. It's a head thing. It's in your mind, especially as an African-American coming into the political space. You can be an American president that just so happens to be black. You can't be a black president. There's a difference in those things. And Obama understood that. It was ingrained in him. And so when you saw him as a polished, educated, very refined in the way that he operated open, in an open sense. Now, behind the scenes, he had a kill list. He acted just like the other presidents acted. I would imagine he cursed behind the scenes. He did all of those things, but in public, never. He was always polished. He was, even in the way he gave speeches, he would say something and then he would say the opposite thing, and you had to figure out, okay, what the hell is Obama talking about in the speech? But it was never, a black president could have never gotten away with half of what Trump could get away with. And maybe they could, because it seems that the political space grows and conforms to whoever the person is. They get used to the president. And so Trump is a whole different animal, though. He is the mask off. It's not that he's doing anything different, kind of. He's more honest about it. So him cursing is just way beyond the political scale. That's just not what presidents do. The way he talks about other countries, the way he gave a browbeating to Europe, is not what presidents do. It may be what they do in earnest. It is not what they do in an overt sense. It's strange. It's like he just rips the mask off and says, okay, this is the burning Ghost Rider face that, yes, you deal with, but now you're going to deal with me openly. And I'm going to treat you in the way that we actually treat you. So yeah, we're going to put sanctions on Europe. It's like, whoa, what do you mean? We're partners. No, we're not. You're vassals. It's he's just very clear in a way that presidents aren't typically clear about that stuff. It's wild. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything.
He's also he's a product of a culture and a product of a sort of social phenomenon as well. So he's seems to me like what competence wise, he's just out of his depth, I think. And I think some of the erraticness and the lashing out and all that sort of stuff is partly just a psychological function of
Incompetence.
I don't know what the hell I'm doing, really.
It's like you're
And
frustrated.
I'm pissed as hell about it.
Get off my yard.
Get off my yard.
Yeah.
But like JD Vance is product of those sort of tech bros and Claremont Institute and all this sort of these sort of weird ideas that there's this sort of global civil culture war. The whole MAGA movement is partly, it's fueled by people like Bannon and all those kind of people who express some pretty weird, crazy ideas, like on China, for example. Bannon's all on. He used to have this song on his show, "Take Down the CCP," which was a great song, but if you listen to the lyrics, it's just, it's just a hymn to American regime change against a country with 1.4 billion people. And
I'm going to let you go after this, but mean, when you point out resentment, is that what it is? Like, I hate to say it in these terms, but this kind of, Britain used to have this thing called the white man's burden. It's like, we're carrying the world. We're carrying the world. The sun never sets on the British Empire. And as you point out, after the Second World War, they were brittle. I mean, they might have had 51% of the world, but they were a very brittle empire at that point. And the U.S. finds itself in kind of a similar situation with segments of the American population feeling like they are losing out, and that is being expressed on a global stage. Whereas that resentment is real in the way that they look at, we feel like we're losing out. We feel like we're losing our jobs. We feel like other countries are getting ahead of us. We feel like, and that rage is being expressed in Donald Trump, not just internally, but also externally. It's like you grew up in a bad home and you're expressing all of the things that you grew up with. It's like, my grandfather was a drunk. My uncle was a drunk. My mama, was a prostitute. And this is the person who I've become as I've grown up and I'm going out into the world. And Trump is representative of that guy and that broken home being expressed on the world stage, if it makes sense. Because the resentment thing I can accept, because if you look at Trump and the things that he says, it's angry guy. It's just weird.
And he feels that. I mean, the whole "Make America Great Again." It's bring back our lost greatness. There's all the sort of machismo sort of poses. Even just, there was the event with the Liberian guy, but I've seen Trump do that with half a dozen journalists from different countries. Oh my God, there are people in the world who don't speak English the way they do in New York. I mean, wow. It's just so, it's a kind of insular attitude as well, I think. And I don't know, so there is the resentment, but there is also just this, very crusading, libertarian, don't tell us what to do sort of element to American political culture, I think, which is
also
totally.
But it's like, we're putting tariffs on this country and we're going to it's almost like we don't have to deal with you on equal terms. And not just not have to, I need to make a show of us not dealing with you on equal terms. I need to show that America is strong, that we're better, that we are going to force this on this other country and they're going to have to accept it. Like, he makes a show, it becomes theatrical. Like the Indonesia thing is a really good example. What rationale do you have for trying to say Indonesia is going to pay 30% tariffs, but we're not going to pay any tariffs to them, and then make a show of you doing that? It's very weird. I don't know how to place it.
And look, it's just backfiring enormously. Like, the perception of America is totally tanked in Australia, and no doubt around the world. I mean, I follow the Indian media quite a bit, and Trump's there was a lot of support in the early weeks or whatever of Trump's administration. You know, Tulsi Gabbard and a few other sort of prominent Hindu or Indian people, and he all that goodwill has been lost, and partly just through all this coercion, or these stupid statements, or the grandiose statements, the total misreading of the India-Pakistan situation, and all the rest of it. So it's really, I mean, it's just as an outside observer, it's just a complete
mess,
utter disaster.
Let me get you on a yes or no question. Will Australia join in with the U.S. to fight Chinese? Yes or no?
Look, I
Yes or no?
I think no. I think no, because there's a lot of resistance to this.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, you know, maybe I'm just telling myself what I want to hear, but I just ultimately can't believe they'll be that stupid. I mean, I had a guy called Sam Roggeveen, who's like a really great defense expert, on my show a couple of years ago. And he basically, you know, said, you know, when people start talking about fighting China over Taiwan, you've got to realize that very, very quickly this will become a nuclear escalation. And he says, and, you know, and that means the extinction of the human race, guys. So it's sort of like at some point, even the crazies, sorry to say, in the United States government are going to have to realize it. So I just, at some level, I can't quite believe it will get to that point. However many preparations, however many battle plans, however many provocations and all the rest of it that are going to happen, because America is just bleeding support in Asia, it's bleeding support in Australia, it's bleeding support in Europe, and at some point people are going to turn around and say to Donald Trump, you know, you've blown it, mate. Maybe it's time to retire. And like to Kamala Harris, to Joe Biden even.
I part of me appreciate Donald Trump's acceleration, because I need the U.S., I need the world to grow up, and I need them to not stop looking at us as daddy, so we can deal with our own affairs.
Exactly.
But we'll see. Jeff, my man, thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations, Jeff. I always learn something from you, man. Jeff Rich, he is author, historian, podcaster who worked 33 years in government, now retired. He currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime studying history, and his knowledge of history currents helps give context to changing currents or changing times. You can find Jeff on YouTube at The Burning Archive, and you can find him on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. And again, I would say he has a fantastic channel. Jeff is awesome. A doctor, by the way. Dr. Jeff Rich.
And you should check my Substack at the moment. I'm doing a whole little feature on Indian history as well, which is very timely given all sorts of events. So viewers should check that one out.
Absolutely, I would check that out. I love your historical pieces. And I mean, like I said, you have a really good channel. It gives a lot of historical context to many of these things that are taking place now. So thank you for this.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Jeff.
Say hello to KJ for me too.
I will tell KJ hi. He's supposed to be on later today, so I'll definitely tell him hi. Thank you, man.
Okay.
Be safe.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Jeff has a fantastic channel. He really does. And I mean it when I say it. This is one of those cases where I absolutely mean it. We are waiting for Dimitri Lascaris. He's going to be here shortly. I want to make sure that I didn't screw up with the mail and the message, because I am a human being, and as a human being, I am flawed. I hear a pop, so apparently I was not that flawed. I will do this chat before I bring him on, though. Nima, happy birthday, McCoy Thomas. My uncle, McCoy Thomas. It's his birthday yesterday. And I I said to my happy birthday on the show earlier today when I was playing chess to test out the channel, make sure the updates didn't break anything. And so, absolutely, McCoy Thomas, Uncle Junie, happy birthday. Happy birthday. I see my man in the background, Reason to Resist, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri Lascaris is a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dimitri ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada, and he is host of Reason to Resist. Dimitri, my man, how you doing? You doing okay this morning?
I'm well, and I want to wish a most happy birthday to McCoy Thomas. I think it's wonderful that you on air have taken the time to honor your uncle. I commend you for that.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, he's my uncle. I love him. His family. Don't often get to see him, but he's definitely in my thoughts, and I care about all of them. How you doing today? You doing okay this morning?
Just woke up. So
Did you?
I don't normally get up this early. I'm a late sleeper, especially now.
You lucky bastard.
You'll make me more productive today because I got out of bed early. So
when I am in the States, I am up at like 4:30, and the show has to be done at 7. So it like starts at 7. So it's like this blurry-eyed reading the news. All right, what's new? What happened overnight? Et cetera, et cetera. Here it's different, but it's worse, weirdly enough. Because for me, it starts at 7 p.m. And so it ends at 10. And then I have to cut videos, process videos, and everything else. I finish at like 4 a.m. It's a mess. It becomes a mess.
Wow.
But I'm glad you could join me, man. There is a lot of news to hit. And the one that I want to hit has to do with Donald Trump's ultimatum. So Donald Trump has... Who the hell? So Donald Trump has given an ultimatum to Russia. And effectively, he has seen Russia, pound the devil out of Ukraine. Ukraine is getting weaker, obviously so. They are losing men, they're losing materials. There's a 2,000-kilometer front that they are being pushed back on. Russia is liberating territory day after day after day. Ukraine seems to be incapable of stopping them. And they have been even sending like 500 drones a day, 700 at times, with Kim-Zog missiles and everything else. They have been destroying everything in their path. So Trump says, okay, I don't like that. That makes me look bad. That's humiliating. And so I am giving Russia 50 days. And in 50 days, I'm going to send weapons. And in 50 days, I'm going to pass secondary sanctions, 100%. Now, Russia's response to this has been, I'll just show you Medvedev before I get into it. Medvedev's response was, Trump issued a decorative ultimatum to the Kremlin. The world shuddered, awaiting consequences. The militant European Union is disappointed. Russia didn't notice. That is their response. We don't care. We don't care. Give me your take on this before I step into this. Because Trump had the opportunity to walk on this war, and he didn't walk. It's now his war.
Yeah. You notice how he says every time he opens his mouth, he's asked about Ukraine. This is Joe Biden's war.
Yeah.
First of all, I can't help but feel that somebody told him, some trusted advisor, that every time you're asked about the Ukraine war, speak that sentence and just keep saying it until you're blue. So that people will forget the fact that you are continuing the war, which is in exact opposition to what he told everybody. He basically lied, Jamaro. He just straight up lied. He did something politicians do all the time. Barack Obama did it, and that is flat out misrepresent what your intentions are when you're running. And then reveal your true colors as soon as you get into the White House. That's exactly what Barack Obama did. He literally, I went out and supported that. I'll never forget this. It was a lesson in political naivety for me. Even though I'm not an American citizen, I can't vote. I went down to Indiana for 10 days and volunteered for Obama's campaign when he was running against Hillary in the Indiana primary. And then after he got the nomination, I went back to Pittsburgh and I did it again. And I sat in a union hall. Such an idiot I am. And I actually, with friends of mine who had come from Canada that weekend, when he won on election night, I cried. I actually started crying.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I was so inspired. I was so angry about the financial crisis and the ripoff and the bankers and so forth that I was inspired by this man. And by the time he got into the White House in January, between November and January, he had revealed his true colors. He just flat out lied. And between that time, he allowed Israel to launch another murderous attack on Gaza. He supported the bailout of the banks. He said that he wasn't going to prosecute CIA torturers, and it was clear as day within 2 or 3 months that he was a complete and utter fraud. Well, this is what Donald Trump is. He's a complete and utter fraud, and he's proven that now in many ways, not just with respect to the Ukraine war, but also with respect, for example, to the Epstein files.
Yep.
But you know, what's really interesting about this is now, I think, you know, many of us, I'm sure you're one of these people, have started to suspect that he was lying a long time ago, you know,
Yes.
well before this announcement. But what's interesting about this announcement is, what does it actually all mean? Okay, we know you're lying, Donald, and you actually have every intention of sustaining this war. But why did he give them a 50-day deadline? Interestingly, you know, it's not out of the question. I'm not predicting this is going to happen, but the Ukraine's forces could collapse within 50 days. Within 50 days, the Russians may succeed in pretty much getting all of the 4 oblasts that they have annexed, with the support, by the way, of referenda that were held there, you know, a couple of years ago in these oblasts. Within 50 days, one thing's for sure, however much Russia may advance, Ukraine is going to suffer a lot more damage, especially with those punishing strikes, drone and airstrikes that you just mentioned. Why did he give him 50 days?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because Donald Trump is going to answer the question for you. Having Cliff Trump being asked that very specific question, like, hey, 50 days is like 2 months. That's kind of a long time for you to give them to make a choice. And again,
because
Russia doesn't care, but let's hear what Trump has to say about it.
dummy, that's why. And I don't think 50 days is very long, and it could be sooner than that. I don't think 50 days is very long. You should have asked that same question to Biden. Why did he get us into this war? You should ask that question. Yeah, and what did he tell you? Why did he get us into this war? You know why he got us in? Because he's a dummy, that's why. And you don't cover it right. But you should be asking that question to Biden. Why did he get us into this war? Because he's incompetent.
He said that what three times just in that one excerpt. He said it's Biden's war. Essentially, that's what he said, like three damn times. I mean, he was the first one who sent lethal weapons to Ukraine in his first presidency. Man, he was doing provocative military exercises, the military force of the United States in Ukraine. He was supporting Ukraine's entry into NATO. This isn't his war. My ass, it's not your war. It was his war before the second term began. Now it's more his war than it's ever been. Sorry to interrupt. This is so ridiculous.
But you're absolutely right. It's almost as if he's being questioned effectively, like, okay, now you're sending weapons. I mean, he was always sending weapons, so it's not like the weapons stopped. And then he immediately pivots to, this is not my war. Dude, you're sending weapons. Like, you're literally at a press conference telling people, I'm now going to sell weapons to the Europeans. The Europeans are going to take those weapons and give to Ukraine. Are you not entertained? And it's like, okay, well, that's not what you got elected on. And you know what it is? It's not that I think Trump was completely lying about wanting to end the war. I just think he wanted to end it on America's terms. And he gets in office, and he is completely incapable to understand that Russia's not going to do that. Like, meaning this is not a real estate deal where your personality is enough to get you over the finish line. Russians have been lied to over and over again. Minsk agreements, 1 and 2, Istanbul agreements, or the Istanbul communique. All of these things were lies. And the U.S. played a massive role in making sure that all of those things failed miserably. So Trump coming in after all of this history has taken place, the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, all of this stuff happened. All of this stuff was built with the U.S. involved. And Trump is acting as if there is no spoon. And we're going to pretend like, we're starting from day one. Okay, for one, you're a flagrant liar, and everybody knows it. And B, this is not about your personality. This is about nations. He doesn't seem to get it. I mean, is that your take on it? Like, how do you view that? Because I do think he started off with, hey, let's make a deal. It's just they don't want his deal.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, is he really going to there's almost no trade between Russia and the United States, right? So if his intention, I don't think this is his intention, because he kept saying secondary sanctions when he announced this, which, for the benefit of those who are listening to us and aren't familiar with that term, means that the United States government plans to sanction anybody who's buying Russian products, and particularly oil. at a rate of 100%, this would be devastating. It would be complete and utter havoc because, the Chinese and the Indians, amongst others, Turkey, I believe, also buys
Saudi
large quantities.
Arabia, Qatar,
And
UAE. Yeah.
Even European countries apparently are still buying significant quantities of Russian oil, despite all their blather. So is he really going to wreak havoc with trade relations around the world, and particularly countries as important to the international trade as Russia and India? I'm sorry, China and India. I'm skeptical about that. But what's very interesting, Jamal, is that there was a decision a few weeks ago. We were told that they weren't going to send any more weapons or particular types of weapons, particularly Patriot air defense missiles, which apparently are in short supply. And there's been a big question about who made that decision and why is Donald Trump now going back on it. I read an article yesterday in Politico, which suggested the person who's behind that decision is a guy named Elbridge Colby, who is the chief of policy, I think, for the Pentagon. He's an undersecretary of state. He and a guy by the name of A. Wes Mitchell, who's currently with a think tank and was, I believe, an undersecretary of state in the first Trump administration, have been writing for years, not about the need to end the Ukraine war. What they've been writing about is the need to put the burden of sustaining the Ukraine war on the Europeans so that the U.S. military can change its focus to West Asia and ultimately to China. And so what Colby did, or is reported to have done, it would be consistent with that. He's saying, we're not going to continue to supply these weapons in short supply to Ukraine, but the Europeans can do that. And meantime, we're going to focus our efforts, as obviously the U.S. military has been doing over the past few months, with its war in Yemen and then attacking Iran and supporting Israel throughout its war of aggression on Iran. So Colby was acting consistently with the plan, which was not to end the Ukraine war, but turn the burden over to the Europeans. And now Trump is not even content with that plan. He's not apparently prepared to allow the Europeans to assume all of the burden. The United States is going to continue, even though financially they're going to pay for this next round of weaponry, apparently, and who knows whether that will ultimately happen. The weaponry is coming from the United States, and it's diminishing U.S. weapon stocks. I think basically what seems to have happened is that Trump, he's so determined to sustain the war that he basically overruled his own, the brains of his foreign policy, which has been counseling him for years to pivot to West Asia and to China. That's how determined he is to actually sustain this war. He's not even taking the advice of the masterminds of his foreign policy.
I don't even know if Trump knows what's going on, if I'm being bluntly honest with you. I don't get do you really get the sense that him being asked the question, it's almost, I agree with you. I think somebody told him, hey, if anybody brings up the war, said this is Joe Biden's war. And because he didn't have an answer for the question, he immediately flips out and starts screaming, it's Joe Biden's war, why did you ask Joe Biden? Because he didn't have an answer for that question. I mean, I can show you the video where they asked him, they said, Trump, do you know who made the choice to stop the weapons? And he says, I don't know. And they said, well, so, and the reporter's like, really? You don't know? He says, well, if a decision is made, I'll know. It's like, but wait a minute, you just say you didn't know who stopped the weapons. I am not certain that he is in full faculties, meaning I don't know if he's in fully charge of his government, where he knows what's going on a day-to-day basis. I could be wrong.
I think you could be completely correct. I mean, I don't know either. I find it a little difficult to believe he doesn't know who made that decision, especially the second time he denied it. He was asked again after I think a couple of days had gone by, and he said, I haven't really thought about it. I don't know. That I'm not buying that. But is it possible?
Why would he lie about that? That's a lie that doesn't make you look good. As president of the United States, to say, well, I don't know who stopped the weapons. That doesn't look good.
Well, because it looks like he's contradicting himself if he says, I know who said it, and the decision was announced, and then I changed my mind. So he doesn't want to. Maybe he doesn't want to be seen to be vacillating on how to deal with the Ukraine war. He wants to seem decisive and so forth, and he changed his mind after he got advice from somebody that he spoke to directly. That's a possible scenario. I don't know, Jamal, but is your suggestion plausible that he doesn't know? Yeah, sure, of course it is. We're talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is is an idiot. He's an absolute moron. He's a carnival parker. He's an ignoramus. It's not just stupid, in my opinion. I didn't think this before, but after watching this circus for the last 6 months, man, I've come to the conclusion he's just flat out stupid. Maybe it's cognitive decline, I don't know. But he's also astonishingly ignorant. That is very clear.
Yeah.
The stuff he should know, he has no idea. So, you know, at the end of the day, all we can be sure about is that the circus continues. And I think it's getting worse in the White House.
What do you think the Russian response is going to be to this? I mean, and because just to add something to that, Financial Times is reporting, and I'm going to be fair to Trump, I'm sure both, but Financial Times is effectively saying right here that Donald Trump asked, "Hey, Zelensky, can you hit Moscow with your, do you have anything that can hit Moscow?" Now, Donald Trump privately encouraged Ukraine to step up deep strikes in the Russian territory, even asking Zelensky whether he could strike Moscow if the U.S. provided long-range weapons, according to people briefed on the discussion. They even brought up St. Petersburg. He's like, hey, it's St. Petersburg too. Now, when Donald Trump was asked about this, because I have my own theory about this, when Donald Trump was asked about this, listen to what he says.
Target Moscow. Should Zelensky target Moscow, sir? Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
Is it Moscow?
So Financial Times is reporting one thing. Donald Trump, when asked openly, is saying no. Give me your thoughts on this before I say anything about this.
You know, again, it's so hard to know exactly what's going on here, but my best guess is that the Financial Times or its sources are lying. It's just a guess, but I think they're lying.
I so disagree with you, by the way. I so disagree with you. But go ahead, make your case. Make your case.
Oh, but it's totally possible they did. Don't get me wrong. I can believe it. But I don't trust the Financial Times at all. Maybe even less than Donald Trump. And I can easily imagine that people behind the scenes are working with the Financial Times to destroy any possibility of a rapprochement between Trump and Putin. That would do it, right? If Putin were persuaded that Trump was privately urging, Zelensky to strike Moscow, he would say this man is every bit as belligerent and as dangerous to us as the Biden administration, possibly even more so. And that would be the end of it. That would be the end of it. As things stand, it may be over any possibility of a real détente between, the Trump administration and Putin's government. But that certainly would put a nail in the coffin of rapprochement. So it could be that. But at the same time, sure, is Donald Trump capable of, lying flagrantly and saying one thing to Zelensky in private and then just staring the journalist in the face and saying, no, he shouldn't strike Moscow? It's entirely possible too. Who really knows at the end of the day? I mean, how can we be sure? What gives you confidence that the Financial Times story is true?
Let me ask it in questions. Let me ask it in formal questions. Would Donald Trump consider that to be strength or weakness to do that? Because he would consider it strength.
Oh, for sure. For sure, he'd consider it a strength.
When Operation Spiderweb took place and those drones hit the airplanes, and then they also went on terrorist activities where they were blowing up trains and everything else, do you think Trump knew?
100%. 100%. I cannot believe for 1 second he didn't know that.
So why would Trump do that? Because keep in mind, under this model, Trump wants a deal. He wants to negotiate. And yet he's knowingly allowing the nuclear triad to be hit. He's allowing terrorist activities to take place. And let's be very clear, the CIA was obviously involved in these terrorist activities. The CIA, MI6, et cetera, they're all throughout Ukraine like roaches doing this stuff. And there was even policy papers that were talking about using terrorist activities, this kind of dirty war that take place in Russia because they're losing the war on the regular fronts. So if they're engaged in a dirty war in Russia where they're killing people, bombing civilian targets, bombing the nuclear triad, and Donald Trump is in on it, what would make this any different?
Well, those are very good questions, Jamal. And ultimately, they do suggest that Donald Trump, they certainly make it more plausible that Donald Trump actually told Zelensky to do this. But who knows what goes on in that harebrained skull of his? I suspect that he would regard striking Moscow as the ultimate provocation. He would view probably those nuclear bombers as a legitimate military target, which they are, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
As provocative as it was, this is military equipment. And so, and these air bases are military. So striking Moscow, is something that I think it's the ultimate red line for Moscow, particularly for, I think, the Russian government, particularly if they start killing large numbers of civilians in Moscow.
Right.
That would, I think all hell would break loose if they did that. So my guess is that Trump probably understands that that's the most severe provocation, short of nuclear weapons, that he could be a party to from the Russian perspective. But I could be wrong.
Would somebody like Trump think that we need, because Donald Trump as an American president wants a deal on U.S. terms. Trump knows that as it stands, Russia is winning. And if things keep going this way, they would continue to win. And so even though Russia's like, hey, we can meet us at the diplomatic table. At the diplomatic table, what Russia's asking for is an unconditional surrender. I don't care what we call it. We can call it fried liver. It is an unconditional surrender, what they're asking for at the diplomatic table. And so if you are Donald Trump and you are trying to get Russia to accept something less than what they want, because what they want is effectively a surrender, how do you get it? Now, you could walk and let Ukraine collapse, but he doesn't want to do that. He's taken on the mantle of the war currently. Okay, so you can't get what you want under the current model. Maybe in Trump's mind, you can get it if you can ramp up pressure against Moscow in, kind of the shadow war by having Zelensky with plausible deniability coming from the White House, firing at Moscow, firing at St. Petersburg, where the U.S. is like, well, we told them not to do that. We didn't give them permission to do that. We can't believe that they did that. We think that's wrong. And so if you ask Trump openly, Trump will say, no, of course not. Winking and nodding. I strongly suspect the Financial Times got it right. Now, what gives me confidence is only because I think Trump is stuck where he currently is with the knowledge that Moscow is going to win, or they are winning as things are going. He has no capacity to bring Putin to the negotiating table to accept anything that he's willing to accept as the American president. And he's stupid enough to think that attacks on Moscow, if they're plausible denied, might bring Russia to the table. I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
But you could be right. And I'll tell you something, Jamal, if he in fact told Zelensky this on the theory that this is going to bring Russia to its knees, it just confirms how, incompetent he is. Every single major provocation has been met by an escalation. I mean, the intense strikes we're seeing now, are coming after the latest provocation, which was the attack on the nuclear bombers, even though they were legitimate military targets. That was obviously highly provocative. And by the way, there were also at the same time what amounted to terrorist activities in the Bryansk region, right, when they derailed those trains. So I think the fairest interpretation of what's currently happening on the ground is that Russia has escalated considerably because of their impatience with these provocations. So if you look at the history of the conflict, and you're analyzing Russia's behavior in a rational way, you would not think that striking Moscow is going to bring them to their knees. But is Donald Trump stupid enough to come to that conclusion, notwithstanding the consistent reaction of Moscow to provocation? Sure, he's stupid enough. I just hope they don't do it. Because, all hell's going to break loose if they do start killing large numbers of civilians in Moscow. That will.
I agree with you. I guess my thing is, from Trump's point of view, where do you go from here? Like, Politico came out with a piece, and in the piece they point out that Donald Trump acknowledges that the Russians are going to win it. They get it. They know it. As a flat fact, the president views that Russia is going to win. They said it flat out. And so then it becomes, okay, but you're still sending weapons. So what do you do if your name is Donald Trump and you say, I'm going to get a deal, and it is clear as day that there is nothing that is taking place militarily that is going to get you that deal because the Russians don't care about your point of view? Putin would be very nice to you. He would talk very kind to you. He will offer you a business deal. He'll do all that stuff. But from the standpoint of budging on the main concerns of these 5 regions are ours, and I'm including Crimea in that, these are ours, these are Russian territory. Ukraine is going to have to acknowledge these territories. You have to stop giving them weapons, no NATO. I'm treating the Russian speakers correctly. Hell, we may even be willing to freeze on these current lines, but those things have to be acknowledged.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the president saying, I'm going to look bad if I do that. That's going to be humiliating if I do that. I can't do that. So what do you do in that situation? That's what I'm stuck with. That's what I'm saying. I think he's running a shadow war under the actual war. Because from his point of view, I need to get a deal and I can't get a deal under the model to which I'm finding myself currently. I'm stuck. I don't know how you get out of this stuckness, if that's a word. That's what I'm stuck with.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Well, he might, he might be saying these things simply because he doesn't want people to credibly make the accusation that Ukraine lost because of a lack of support from the United States. Even if he knows, that the war is lost and there's no hope, nothing will happen. That might be why he's doing this, and that might well be why he gave 50 days, because he's hoping that Ukraine will be brought to its knees between now and then. But he'll be able to say, "Hey, man, I threatened them with sanctions, 100% sanctions and secondary sanctions, and I tried, and I agreed to send them more weapons. It's not my fault. It's Joe Biden's war."
I'm glad you mentioned Israel. I mean, because we could have went to Epstein, or I don't know if you have a comment on the Epstein thing. You're in Canada, so I may not be as big there.
This is wild. I've been watching very closely. In fact, I've discovered Candace Owens in the last 2 weeks. I knew she was out there, but I started watching her. Her tirades against Trump and his decision not to release the Epstein files.
Oh man, the MAGA has been losing it. They have been flipping. To give you a perspective, just to give you a taste of what has been going on here with this. This is Trump right here. This is Trump being asked about it. Because now it has gotten to him directly, where they're like, hey, are you in the list? Is that the issue? Are you in the list? And of course, the answer to that question is probably yes. But this is Trump being asked directly. Listen to his response. And I'm gonna show you Alex Jones melting down. He's like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, why don't you release the files?
Yeah.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled?
I don't understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And incredible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them get.
He is trying to argue at this point that this is happening because of Obama and Comey, and that Obama and Comey set him up, and that all of the information in the Epstein files were effectively written by them, has nothing to do with him. He doesn't understand why people would feel some kind of way about a pedophile that's supposed to have thousands of women in the way that they talked about it, or thousands of children that were molested and that were used as an intel operation. He's like, nothing to see here, folks. He doesn't get it. And he does, I believe he does get it, 3 a.m. between him and his God. He just can't deal with it. And it's not going away. Like it's eating at his presidency. Because from MAGA's point of view, you're protecting a pedophile. Why are you protecting a pedophile?
Yes, and as Candace Owens says, this is an issue that should unite the right and the left.
Yes.
There's no person with a conscience would tolerate impunity for the powerful or other men who slept with those trafficked girls. And last night, Jamal, I actually had occasion to read again the press release of the Justice Department when, during the first Trump administration, they arrested Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Okay. And it alleges quite clearly that Epstein trafficked dozens of young girls, dozens. With whom or to whom was he trafficking these girls?
Where the Johns?
Exactly. Who are the Johns? And we all know that his best friends were the rich and the powerful. He was constantly seen in the company of rich and powerful men, including Donald Trump. And we know that these people went to the residences where he had rigged all of these cameras and all of this audio equipment, and frequently made trips to the posh residences and island hideouts of Jeffrey Epstein, where these young girls who were being trafficked were situated. So it's absolutely crystal clear to anybody with a functioning brain that some very powerful people, including people who might be at the level of a president, head of state for foreign countries, that they were involved in child sex trafficking, that they actually molested girls. And again, anybody, whatever your political orientation may be, if you just have a basic sense of human decency, it would outrage you that the powerful men who did this are given complete impunity. And, as I'm sure Alex Jones in his tirade probably mentioned, Trump's entire entourage, when he was running to be president again, this time around, were talking constantly about the importance of releasing the Epstein files and of accountability. Yep. So he's saying, I don't know why people are still talking about this. His own team was talking about this right up until the time he got into the White House. He says he died so long ago. It was 2019 during the first Trump administration. We're not talking about ancient history here, man. These people should have already been held to account. It's a scandal that they still haven't been held to account. So this is, he gave another interview yesterday. I fell off my chair. He was asked, did Pam Bondi tell you if your name was in the Epstein files? He goes, oh, no, she didn't mention that to me. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? Your own attorney general didn't tell you whether your name is in the damn Epstein files. But, as it turns out, Jamal, he doesn't actually even need to be told by Pam Bondi because, as I said, Epstein was arrested during the first Trump administration. Okay, it was his Justice Department that did that. You think in 2019, Donald Trump didn't ask before they arrested Epstein, is my name in those damn files? You think he didn't figure that out?
And Acosta said it was intel. Acosta said Epstein was part of intelligence. He was very clear. Epstein was part of intelligence. He was above my pay grade. They told me to effectively let him cut him loose. And the deal that they gave him he didn't even tell the witnesses. Like, that became an issue later on in the case. And just to back you up, here's Trump being asked flat out.
On what? On the
DOJ and FBI.
On what? On what subject?
Epstein. On Epstein, of the review of the files. Attorney General Pam Bondi.
A very quick briefing.
Did she tell you, what did she tell you about the review? And specifically, did she tell you at all that your name appeared in the file?
No, she's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen. And I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden.
I mean, that is unacceptable. Nobody is accepting that. And just one last thing, Alex Jones, somebody better check on him. Somebody better check on him. I don't want to see anything happen to Alex Jones. This is him effectively losing it over these files. I mean, his audience, you can imagine, is not going to tolerate what's going on. This is Jones.
We want your agenda to succeed. I've done deep research, never saw you involved with Epstein and criminal activity. So why are you acting like this? You made a deal with the establishment to leave you alone. Have they rolled over? U.S. intelligence we know is involved. Mossad, CIA, MI6, we already know that. But instead, you just continue to say nothing to see here, move along, though go ahead and release information, but there's no information to release. Contradiction for contradiction, flip-flopping after flip-flopping. 180s on 180s on 180s. Jesus, I'm on a roller coaster here.
He has lost Alex Jones. He's lost Alex Jones. I'm fascinated by this. I don't. His entire team, Bongino, Kash Patel, Bondi, Trump, all of these people before they got in kept saying Democrats were pedophiles. They're working with the pedophiles. We're going to release the files. You have a grown man having sex with children and giving those children out to other grown men to molest those children on my pedophile island or on that airplane. You have dozens of young girls who they've molested and they've used intel in order to effectively blackmail various people. Like, this is what we've been saying for years. And now Trump is like, none to see here, folks. There is no spoon. Epstein didn't exist. And he didn't kill himself even though he didn't exist. And it's like, what? What
Yeah.
just happened? Just
Damn
amazing.
body didn't mention your name. Give us a break, man. Her boss, she didn't say, boss, your name is in those files, or boss, we checked, your name isn't in those files. She told Trump, and he already knew. I'm sure he knew back in 2019. In fact, he knew before. I mean, let's be clear here. If Trump, in fact, we know Trump cavorted and
They were friends for decades.
With Epstein. We've all seen the videos. We've all seen the photographs, right? So Trump knows, we know, and Trump knows we know that he spent a lot of time with Epstein, and for years they were, party buddies. And we know, and Trump knows we know, that Epstein's houses, his residences, were jam-packed with all kinds of secret camera equipment and audio equipment. So it just stands to reason that Trump is in there somewhere, and Trump knows we know he's in there somewhere, and it's just a question of how far did he go? Did he just cavort with Epstein, or is he one of these monsters who slept? I don't know the answer to that question, but is Trump capable of that? Of course he is. He's perpetrating a damn genocide, Jamal. That man's capable of anything. And he knows exactly how implicated he is in all of this. And it's so obvious he's lying. I'm not actually surprised that people who formerly supported Trump and have significant influence have just lost their shit. I mean, again, if you have just a basic sense of human decency, and all these people who claim to be Christians who support Trump, we're talking about trafficking children, for Christ's sakes. You call yourself a Christian, and you're not going to get upset about giving impunity to people who slept with trafficked girls?
He is throwing his body to protect a pedophile. That's what it looks like. And his own base can't. That's even too far for them. They're like, dude, this guy was raping kids. What are you doing? How are you protecting this guy? How are you protecting the Nijans who are doing that? Yeah, I don't blame him. This is, God bless him for being willing to, go after Trump on this. And he can say Obama and Comey till he's blue in the face. Nobody believes that. Because what it sounds like, okay, so there is a foul. If you're saying Obama and Comey wrote a foul, okay, there is a foul. And we don't believe that Obama and Comey wrote it, but you've just legitimized the fact that a foul exists. So why are you not releasing it? And then the prison tape, apparently that was stitched together. That was the other thing. They used Adobe to stitch it together, and they're 3 minutes missing in that tape.
What a clown show.
Yeah.
They actually thought that was going to calm down people. I mean, you got to be kidding me, man. Jesus.
Yeah, it's a farce. I'm glad you brought up Israel and saying he's committing a genocide, and this will be the last thing. This is the gate that these guys are building to keep thousands of people pinned in. It's astonishing. I can show you the video of people being shot trying to get food, but I'm going to be more polite than that. I've shown it in other videos. It's disgusting. They are committing a genocide in broad daylight. I had Dan Kovalik on the show yesterday, and Dan says he thinks the point is extermination, not expelling. Meaning, Dan is like, they're not letting people leave, and they're shooting people in pens and starving people to death. Kind of like when the Germans took over, I want to say Lvov, but it's not Lvov. There's another city. But when Germans took the city, they didn't go into the city. They just surrounded it and let the people starve to death because it was been too much to try to take down the city itself. That is what they're effectively doing. They're not letting in food and water. They're destroying water trucks. They're not letting in food. They're surrounding the place and making it smaller and smaller so they can effectively put them in a pen. That gate is one of the areas where thousands of Palestinians are supposed to effectively be caged, which is effectively a concentration camp. It's a death camp that they're effectively building. And they're doing it, I think they said they need 10, 15% more room to take down where they can just keep 1.8 million people or how many are left in a small concentrated area. I'm amazed. I have to be honest that the world just watches that happen.
I was amazed, but after watching this horror show for 22 months, I am not amazed anymore. I'm absolutely and utterly disgusted. I never thought I'd see such a thing. It's so bad, Jamal, what they're doing, that even the former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, is saying that this planned quote unquote humanitarian city would be a concentration camp. He's condemning the government of which he was the head for years, in the most strident terms. And Western leaders are continuing to do absolutely damn nothing about this. Now, today I think it's the second day today of an international conference, which includes Brazil and China, and there was one other major state in there, but I think there's about 20 nations participating, in which they're apparently, let us hope that they're finally serious about this. They are going to put together a joint plan to hold Israel accountable, or at least to deter it from continuing this genocide. Is Dan correct? He could well be correct, because if they do, if they expel these, who knows what the number of survivors is. Let's say it's 1.8 million at this point, 1.8 million right across the border into Egypt. What's going to happen then? What are they going to do, those people? What are the Egyptians going to do? Is it going to destabilize the Egyptian regime of Sisi? And might it lead to somebody coming to power who actually is outraged, as the Egyptian people are, outraged by what Israel has done to the Palestinians? And then what? The problem hasn't gone away. The problem has just been shifted right across the border to Egypt, and may come back to haunt Israel. And it's not like, Israel is going to be able to suddenly, if it gets rid of all the people of Gaza, suddenly it's going to populate Gaza. Gaza is a disaster zone. There are unexploded munitions everywhere. It would take years and years for Israel, even with all the money coming in from the United States they could possibly ask for, to turn Gaza into a habitable place for its settlers. So what is going to happen during that period of time with all of these desperate Palestinians? So I think probably Israel would prefer just to kill them all, if it can get away with it. And the thing that's quite apart from the horror, the evil, the sheer evil of what it's doing, in a practical sense, what is this actually going to accomplish? Because not only will the Palestinians still be there if they get shoved into the desert, and this could destabilize Egypt, which would be a catastrophe for Israel, but Gaza, there are hundreds of kilometers of tunnels in Gaza, which the Israeli military itself has admitted have not been blown up. And we've seen again and again resistance fighters emerge from those tunnels in the north of Gaza, in the center of Gaza, and inflict casualties. That's not going to stop. That's not going to stop, even if they manage to get all those civilians crammed into that hellish little space. They're going to continue to confront resistance. They're going to continue to suffer casualties. After 22 months, Jamal, the worst casualty month that Israel has had in the last 12 years. I'm sorry, in the last 12 months was June. And right now they're on pace to exceed the number of killed Israeli terrorists, which is what they are, in July. So that would be the worst month. So the trend is upward in terms of Israeli casualties, even after all of this time. And they're suffering those casualties in places like Beit Hanun, which is far away, relatively far from the border of Egypt, right in the northeast corner of the Gaza Strip. There's no indication that they're any closer to defeating the armed resistance now than they were, 12 months ago.
Why do you think that number has gone up? My hypothesis was because of the war with Iran, that Iran damaged something in a way that we aren't entirely seeing, because Israel is not necessarily exposing their weaknesses, but that whatever Iran was hitting when they were hitting in the occupied areas, that it did damage. Something was destroyed, whether it was communications, something was broken, that allowed those fighters to be more effective at those attacks. But I could be wrong. It could just be attrition, damage. I don't know what it is. What do you think is going on with this?
Well, I was saying back in the ceasefire, actually before the ceasefire, there were military experts from the United States who commented on the sheer amount of unexploded munitions there were in Gaza. And I was saying, if I were, I'm not a military expert, but if I were, resistance leader during the ceasefire, which I think lasted 6 weeks, I'd be telling my people to go out and gather up all of those unexploded munitions to the maximum possible degree, and to create a stockpile of explosive devices. And this is the primary way in which they have been killing them. In fact, since the ceasefire ended, they have been, setting bombs and entrapments with massive explosive charges. And that's how the ambushes begin. And then their fighters are now emerging from the tunnels in the aftermath of the explosion and are engaging in firefights with the Israeli military. Why is these? I think that's part of the reason they were given this massive stock. I mean, U.S. military experts were commenting on how how much explosive material the resistance fighters would be able to employ because of the bombardments over 22 months. So I think also, you may be correct, there may well have been some kind of damage to command and control, because we now know that I think it was 5 military bases were hit in Israel, thanks to satellite imagery and data that was provided by the University of Oregon to the Telegraph. That's a possibility. Another possibility is that there's just sheer fatigue in the Israeli army. They're becoming, they're just arrow prone. When you're really tired and exhausted and psychologically your morale is destroyed, you make mistakes. You make lots of mistakes. So, and frankly, the performance of the Israeli military from the very beginning has been atrocious in the Gaza Strip, not just from a moral perspective. It's been incompetent. They've constantly gone into areas, laid waste to them, claimed they had control, and then we found out later they didn't have control against a lightly armed insurgent force. So it does appear, however, that they're getting worse.
Do you think extermination is the goal? And do you think the world will stand by? I mean, look, this has been bad enough, right? I mean, they've been obviously killing the population and not necessarily caring, killing women and children and everything else. Flagrantly using starvation as a tool of war to try to thin out the number of people that were effectively there. Killing 1.8 million people, though, is intense. Like that's the amount of either munitions or the amount of time it would take to starve that many people. And you can't really do it nakedly. It's almost like you have to do that kind of, or can you do it nakedly? I guess my thing is it really extermination is the objective? Because if it's not, I don't know what is.
I have no doubt it's the objective. Whether they intend to try to get away with it, we can debate that. This has always been the objective, Jamal. It's always been the objective. They would love nothing more than to eliminate the entire Palestinian population of historic Palestine. And it's not just the 1.8 million people, because you think they're going to stop there. If that, in fact, they're going to go to the West Bank, and 20% of the population in Israel itself is of Arabic, of Palestinian origin, even though they're citizens of Israel. And there's this massive population in East Jerusalem. No one should have any illusions about this. If we allow them to get away with exterminating the population of Gaza, and by the way, I don't think the world will allow that. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what this conference yields. I think there's going to be at least some concrete action taken, which would be an improvement. But I think that the world would finally, and maybe I'm being optimistic, maybe I'm being naive, but I really can't believe that the world will allow this to go all the way. I think they will stop it long before it gets to 1.8 million casualties. There may be a lot more killing before they finally intervene, but I think the world will. I think public outrage will simply become unmanageable in Western countries, and especially if they then turn to the population of the West Bank and the Palestinian population of Israel itself and begin to kill them en masse in the same way that they're killing the people of Gaza en masse. I don't think they'll get away with it. But do they want to do it? I think they wanted to do this from the founding of Israel.
But what makes the people in the West Bank special?
Oh, I think they have a problem there. The problem is that those the population of the West Bank, which I think is 2.1 million or 2.5 million Palestinians, is intermingled with 800,000 Israeli settlers. In Gaza, it's relatively easy from a practical perspective to exterminate the population, because you just bomb the bejesus out of them. Just send in, you don't care how accurate those bombs are. Your goal is to kill as many people as possible. You can't do that in the West Bank with all those settlers intervening. So it's a more complex military operation.
From your mouth to God's ears. Because one or two things is going to happen. Either they're going to be able to accomplish the objective and kill or expel all of those people, or something else. And I guess I don't know what the something else is. If Israel has to be stopped and the world community comes together and says stop and willing to put military force behind it, okay, I don't know what that looks like. And maybe it's a failure of imagination on my part. Because let's say those countries come together and say, okay, this is enough. How do you exert pressure? And does it require military force? in order to get Israel to stop. From Israel's point of view, facts on the ground is that we are militarily accomplishing our objectives. Okay, so let's say you get 20 countries that come together and say enough. What does that mean?
You don't even need to send in military. For Israel is so vulnerable economically, so vulnerable. That tiny little pipsqueak of an economy. This isn't the Russian Federation, which managed it's amazing, how resilient they were in the face of Western sanctions.
Yeah.
You did that to Israel, Israel would be obliterated economically. Absolutely
I know, but the
obliterated.
U.S. has just been paying for Israel. I mean, their economy is already shot. It's not like they have a functional economy in the way that we would think of an economy. The U.S. they have a wartime economy that the U.S. has been giving them billions. We've been building stuff for them, sending them free stuff, sending them money. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm misunderstanding how this stuff is working. But it seems that their economy is not necessarily running on all cylinders already. It seems that we're just propping their economy up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that's true. And I think you're quite right that if the United States government, with its immense resources, says, we're going to keep Israel afloat, notwithstanding economic sanctions, punishing economic sanctions being imposed by other countries, probably they could sustain Israel for some time. But then, are the American people going to put up with that?
Yes.
I'm sure you saw Tucker Carlson's speech, Jamal, at this conservative convention that just happened. I mean, that was unbelievable. He was standing up there saying, openly, Israel, was working with Epstein. We should be able to say these sorts of things. And people in the audience were cheering for Tucker Carlson.
Dimitri, America is different than Canada. I know what you mean. And America is different than Europe. Our connection, there was a poll that came out of Princeton, and it pointed out that America wants, or its influence into the political space represents less than 1% of influence. They don't care. Already the American public is turned against Israel. It doesn't seem to matter in regards to the way that we have Congress members who walk through with Israeli flags in their offices and on their doors. You have people who came in with Israeli military uniforms on. I mean, they shouldn't even be in Congress, let alone representing anybody, but they do that. It is hard to get across the degree of support that Israel has in Congress. I could be wrong.
I agree. Like I said, this is not. I'm not suggesting that the American policy is going to change in the next few weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think we are. I do believe, and again, maybe I'm being naive. Maybe I don't understand. Just how corrupt American politics are. But I really don't think American people are going to allow this to go on to the bitter end. I don't think they're going to allow it. So we'll find out.
From your mouth to God's ears. I really hope you're wrong. You're right on this. I really hope those other world leaders get involved. And I feel crappy saying I hope, because it's my country that's doing this nonsense. We've lost control of our government in real terms. And it's like a Frankenstein monster that is just wreaking havoc around the world. Yeah. Dimitri, man, I always appreciate these conversations. I really do. And I really thank you for joining me. Absolutely.
Only for you will I get up at this hour.
Oh, I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. By the way, what time is it there?
Oh, it's I'm on East Coast time, so it's now 9:08.
Okay.
It's not that early. I certainly don't get up like you do, man. I just couldn't do what you do.
A lot of people say that. You'd be surprised you get used to it. I mean, I did it at the radio station for 5 years. And after a while, you just get used to it. And you get the show over with and you go on with your day.
That's always a pleasure.
Dimitri Lascaris, man, thank you for this. I really do appreciate these conversations deeply. And I'm being honest when I say that. Thank you for joining me. I'm Dimitri Lascaris. He's a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, he ran for the leadership of the Green Party in Canada, and he is host of Reason to Resist. You be safe, and you have a fantastic day, man. Thank you for this.
Peace out.
Bye-bye. All right. Dimitri, shout out to him. I always enjoy those conversations. I really do. And definitely check out Reason to Resist. Dimitri has a fantastic show on YouTube. Definitely check him out. All right. KJ will be here. What time is it? It's 9:09. I have room to run. All right. I would like to make an argument. And there is a saying, I think I've said it, but other people have said it also. Don't mistake an argument that is coherent for it being true. It is my hypothesis. It's my hypothesis. I've had people on the show when Operation Spiderweb took place, where Donald Trump, or let's say where Ukraine attacked the nuclear triad. They were bombing the Crimean Bridge, and they were bombing civilian sites. Specifically, the one that took most of the notice was when they blew up a train. They waited for a civilian train. There was no military targets. There were just random people on trains, and they blew the train up, killing the people on the train. You can imagine the rage that was in Moscow when they saw this. After that, it took Donald Trump several days to respond. And when Donald Trump did respond, he was like, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. Okay, that's a bit weird. It took you several days to respond, for one. Your response was panicky, too. And at the end of that, if you remember after that, Trump got on a phone call with Putin, where Trump came out and said he was very strong, saying that they will have to respond. And if you remember after that, Russia, the gates of hell opened on Ukraine after that. The 500 drones, 700 drones, the attacks on Kiev, the ruthless attacks, the movement on the battlefield. Now, some people would say, okay, this seems like a new phase of war. Part of it had to do with the offensive that was taking place, but the other part of it did seem to be kicking it up a notch in retaliation for what took place. It is a military target at those airplanes, but just because it's a military target, don't mean there won't be consequences for you to do it. The question, and the operative question is, what did Trump know? Either Trump is deeply, deeply incompetent and doesn't know what is happening with its own government, or Trump knew, which means either Trump's a flagrant liar or Trump doesn't have control of his government, which signals to Russia, in either case, can't trust him. Can't trust him. If he doesn't have control of his government, you damn sure can't trust him. If he's a habitual liar, you damn sure can't trust him. So the fact of the matter is most likely both of those things. And because it's both of those things, we need to proceed with our plans on the battlefield. Any notion of negotiations doesn't matter. Unfaithful actor. Our lot in life is going to be done with muscle and military might. Now, my point when that happened was Trump obviously knew. He obviously knew. And the reason why I made the argument that he obviously knew is because, as I kind of made the point to Dimitri, Trump is stuck. Donald Trump believed that force of personality alone would get him something that, for all intents and purposes, has nothing to do with personality. I can be very pleasant with you. Doesn't mean that I'm going to allow you to get what you want militarily on something that is an issue of nations. So from the standpoint of Russia, we have issues associated with the way that the United States and the way that NATO has operated. It needs to stop. That is our issue. If you're not dealing with that, then nothing else you say matters. You can be pleasant. We can get lunch. I can tell you you have a nice wife. You can tell me I have a nice country. All of those things can be true. We can talk about business deals. We can talk about all of that. If we're not talking about, at the root of it though, NATO is not going to continue to expand. The regions that we have effectively liberated, who voted to be part of Russia, are now part of Russia, and you need to acknowledge that those are going to be part of Russia. You're not going to keep arming Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be demilitarized. You're not going to have a Nazi Banderite government that's in office, meaning there are things that need to take place in physical matter reality that we're fighting this war for. And unless you're going to deal with those things, I don't care about your personality. Trump didn't seem to understand that. So an American president who could have walked, but didn't walk, he wanted a deal. But the catch of the matter is Witkoff went to Russia and Russia told him exactly what he wanted. Russia's been saying the same thing for the last, 2 years, 3 years. An American president doesn't believe he can accept it, because accepting those things is going to acknowledging that you have failed. And when I say you, I mean the United States government has failed. The idea that Donald Trump is acting as if he's not party to a conflict that he's sending weapons to is nonsense. They know it's nonsense. Now, Russia may talk about it in these terms of what we believe Trump is being misled. We believe that Donald Trump is getting the correct information or is not getting the correct information. They will say that. Do you honestly think they believe that? Do you honestly think they believe that? Donald Trump is in a pickle. He's stuck. He's taken the mantle that he is going to get a deal. Okay, how do you do that? Russia is not accepting your stupid deal because your stupid deal ignores the fact that they have won and are winning this conflict, and losers don't get to dictate terms. And so you either accept their terms or the war continues. That is all there is. There is no in between. Russia even agreed, we're open to a ceasefire, providing you stop giving Ukraine weapons, you stop allowing the training. Now, this is not a horrible deal, because what this effectively is saying is, if you honestly believe that we're going to freeze a conflict and we're going to let you continue to arm Ukraine, you're out of your mind. Why will we do that? Many negotiations are taking place as the fighting continues. Trump is trying to act as if he wants a ceasefire because he wants it on America's terms. And the fact of the matter is, as a failing hegemon that has just lost the war, you're not going to get your terms. Trump is stuck. The first time around when they had Operation Spiderweb, I strongly suggest that what Trump thought was that he can run a shadow war under the actual war that he was running. And shadow war in the sense that I'm above it all. This is Joe Biden's war. I didn't know anything about that. Plausible deniability. And I guess my point is he's doing the same thing now. This Financial Times piece that came out, it said this right here. Donald Trump has privately encouraged Ukraine to step up deep strikes on Russian territory, even asking Vladimir Zelensky whether he could strike Moscow if the U.S. provided long-range weapons, according to people briefed on the discussion. Now, you could say Financial Times is lying. That may be true. You could say that the people who were briefed on the discussion are coming back and trying to put a knife in Donald Trump in any notion of negotiations. That may be true. But considering the situation that I've presented, where Donald Trump is trying to get a deal, he's stuck. He can't get a deal. He can't make any movement. What do you do? Joe Biden said every weapon system in the world they can come up with. Joe Biden said hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. What are you, Trump, going to do that is somehow radically different than what Joe Biden was doing? And the fact of the matter is, you can't do anything under the terms by which you're trying to operate as a negotiator. So you're sending weapons, but you're sending weapons that Joe Biden was already sending. And you're out of the systems that you, all things being equal, will want to send in order to defend Ukraine. 25% of Patriot interceptors needed for Pentagon military plans. We're out. We're tapped out. So what do you do? What do you do? And would a person like Donald Trump, with a wink and a nod, say, we need to bring Putin to the negotiating table? We need to be strong in order to bring Putin to the negotiating table. And you have to be strong because if you wanted to make a deal, you could have, but you didn't do that. And maybe one of the ways of doing that is if you could ratchet up pressure on Vladimir Putin. How do you do that? I know you give Ukraine permission to hit long-range targets. And you act as if you didn't know and you didn't give that permission for them to do that. You act as if my hands are off it. Plausible deniability. Hey, Putin, do you now want to negotiate? Do you now want to talk now that they have the capability of hitting Moscow? Especially if you take the position that you don't believe that Moscow will hit a U.S. target. Now the catch becomes, do you believe that Putin, if that happens, will strike a NATO target? That's the question, right? Now the European leaders have come up to the assessment that the answer is no. The United States has come up with the assessment, I strongly suspect, that the answer is no. They're gambling with this, yes. But all of this has been a gamble up to this point. Why would the gambling stop now? Especially if Donald Trump needs to find some way to create some movement in Moscow that moves closer to his particular position where they may be willing to accept the deal. And if Donald Trump doesn't want to be, quote unquote, weak by going for some kind of negotiations because he doesn't believe he can go further, that he's already gone, then he has to do something that is different than what he had been doing prior. And if you're sending a wink and a nod to Ukraine to make those long-range strikes because you believe those long-range strikes would at the very least allow Ukraine an X factor that may pull Putin to the table. Now, anybody in their right mind will say this is insane. But all of this has been insane. Donald Trump knows that Ukraine has lost the war. Right here. Politico. And I don't doubt it for a moment that Politico knows this. And part of the rationale, right here, the president views that Russia's going to win. It's only a matter of time. And if you know that, and you know anything that you do is not going to change that, then how do you get Putin to get closer to your position? And does it, or is that point of view, we need to ratchet it up? I think it's that. Now, again, I could be wrong in this. It's a hypothesis. It's not a theory. But I'm saying I believe firmly that first time around in Operation Spiderweb, Donald Trump knew exactly what was going on. His response got across that he knew exactly what was going on. How is this different than Operation Spiderweb? They were going after the nuclear triad. They were murdering civilians. I can show you the documentation where they were talking about running a shadow war of basically a quote unquote dirty war, that the United States was fully on board for that dirty war. Okay, well, that's just murdering civilians. That's just killing people behind the scenes because you can't win the war. How is this different? How is this different? When Trump was asked about this directly, Trump's response was this. And again, habitual liars lie. So what does this response matter?
Moscow. Should Zelensky target Moscow, sir? Should Zelensky target Moscow or deeper into Russia?
No, he shouldn't target Moscow.
Is it Moscow?
Now, what do you expect him to say in this moment? Do you really expect him to say, yes, they should target Moscow, regardless of what the truth is? Russia and the media in Russia is going to play that clip and say, well, Donald Trump said that they shouldn't target Moscow. If a missile lands in Moscow, remember this video. And remember I said it. Now, again, I could be wrong. From my point of view, this is a hypothesis. It's a hypothesis based on previous action by the Trump administration, and it's a hypothesis based upon Donald Trump being stuck. What do you do if you're the president of the US who's trying to get a deal and the other guy is completely intransigent and doesn't care about you as a hegemon? Do you believe you can put pressure on him with a provocative action if you don't believe that he is going to hit a target of US interests or NATO interests? Up to this point, Russia has refused to hit a NATO country. Germany, if you notice, backed out of sending Taurus missiles the moment that the United States has effectively said they would supply their own. So they are looking at it as the US is getting further involved and ensconced into the war. That's what Europe is looking at it as. That's what they want daddy to get involved, because they firmly believe that if the United States got involved, that Russia would back down. It is very possible that they've infected Trump's thinking on this. And Trump may actually believe that if a missile hits Moscow and kills a lot of people, which a missile may do, that Russia wouldn't retaliate against NATO. It's a gamble. It's a gamble. We'll see. I could be wrong. As I said, don't mistake something coherent for something to be true. It is my hypothesis. But I do firmly believe that Trump is running a shadow war under the actual war. I do believe that Donald Trump is stuck in a position where he has no more latitude to move on the issue of a deal, which is why I say Trump should have just walked. If you can't get a deal because that deal is going to be on Russian terms, then your best bet would have just been to walk. Let them fail. And at the point at which they fail, this will resolve upon its own. And you can say it was Joe Biden's war, that was Joe Biden's failure. But that's not where we are now. This is Trump's war. This is Trump's failure. He is sending weapons now. He is the one who's taking ownership of this war. And we will find out what that looks like, I guess, in the developing months. I will say one last thing. The 100% tariff thing is absurd. Lindsey Graham wanted it to be 500%. Now, the issue with this is oil and gas goes into the international markets. If you are charging supposedly allied countries like Saudi Arabia and India 100%, A, what do you think that's going to do for the price of gas and oil? B, what do you think that's going to do to your relationship with those countries? C, you're trying to work out a deal right now with India. Many countries, or many people, their fears that India is a stalking horse, which allows, let's say, U.S. interests into BRICS. Now, India doesn't necessarily see it that way. They just look at it as we're trying to make the best deal possible for the best interests of our country. But what does it do to the relationship and any kind of deal that you make between the United States and India if you're going to hit India with 100%? I tell you, they're not going to change their behavior, nor is a sovereign country going to accept you trying to interfere into sovereign affairs, one of which being who we negotiate with. That is going to backfire massively, not just diplomatically, but also it's going to backfire on the American public in regards to the amount the American public pays for oil and gas. The gas that we make in the United States goes on the international market. It doesn't just made here, stays here. That stuff is priced internationally. So we are going to get hit with those sanctions also, meaning we're going to feel the fallback effects of whatever takes place within the 100% tariff or secondary tariffs that are passed. And in no way will it stop Russia from continuing and proceeding with their war. Not one iota. It's not going to stop one Ukrainian dying. And yet the war keeps going on. Let's go to chat real quick before we have a few minutes. Happy birthday, McCoy Thomas. McCoy Thomas is my uncle. His birthday was yesterday. I didn't get the chance to say happy birthday yesterday, so I'm going to say it today. Happy birthday, Uncle Junie. Happy birthday. We have one more. Heidi Jamal Ahmad. Well, another Jamal. Welcome. I have an R in my name. Genocide in Gaza by the Collective West. After that, why would we be surprised that all the pretense of democracy and rule of law in the West is busted? It never existed. It never existed. It's flying water. Yeah, fish in water. Like, I'll give you an example. The Democratic Party, for example, would say, under Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, all of these people, we're united, so you should vote for me. And I may not be exactly what you want, but we're on the same political spectrum, even if I'm further to the right, and we're together. And then when you get somebody like Sanders or somebody like Mandani's wife's husband, because she's attractive, but you get somebody like Mandani, the jig is up. You see it for what it is. Well, we're not really united. We're pretending to be united while we're in charge and while we're the main force and the rule set. And so we can have rules if indeed everybody else is following our rule set. But the moment it gets to the point where our rule set becomes inconvenient for us, then the rule set needs to change. It becomes rules-based, not just rules that all of us are following, all of us are abiding by. I'm saying that is a world. That is the world to which we operate in, especially from an international standpoint. We will pretend to have these pretense of values as long as these things are being challenged and as long as these things are in our best interests. The moment that these things cease to be in our best interests, that pretense goes away and you see the real face of the way things operate. The idea that the International Criminal Court were dragging African dictators and throwing them before The Hague, or the guy from the Philippines and throwing them before The Hague. I'm not saying that these are good people. I'm pointing out that you have a US president with an S, presidents, who are backing and paying for a genocide to the hilt, full-throatedly, and the ICC can do dick about it. How do you have an international criminal court when you have monsters and murderers who have been killing all of these people in mass and putting these people in cages and shooting people who are going to get food, starving human beings, and yet no consequence? No consequence. You get the Western states that not just not say anything about it for years, but back it to the hilt, giving support. And then when their communities, their societies start saying, hey, we don't like the fact that you're murdering all of these people and you've been shooting these women and children in the back and all of these dead kids and dead babies. It's like, okay, so now we're going to pipe up and say something about it, even though we're not doing anything real about it. And I'm saying this, yes, as an American, knowing full well that it's my government that is effectively backing it. And it's, it comes across as me bitching about somebody else doing something about government. That is true, and that is fair. But that doesn't give a pass to these other countries when a country committing genocide is a world matter, not just an individual country matter. Hope you get my point. It's not just, well, the United States is paying for it, so the United States is the one that should do something about it. That is true. By the same token, the fact that it is taking place at all in a world of nations that have basically said that genocide is supposed to be a red line doesn't give the other nations a pass in regards to what is taking place and what is happening. And instead of the other nations getting involved, they just watch. We all just watch. We watch people be humiliated. We watch their kids get killed. We watch their parents get shot in the face. We watch people who are hungry in these massive pens trying to get food, getting shot at. And we watch and we watch and we watch. Yeah, this pretense of Western, quote unquote, Western values. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. You have Western countries that are committing a genocide. So the Western value stuff, I don't know what that means. Agreed. Dark Bushida. Trump is making a fool out of himself. Dude, he is doing that every day. In fact, before I even get to the rest of the quote, listen to this. This is our president. Listen to what is taking place here, because maybe you can explain it to me, because I don't know what the hell is taking place. I don't know what is being said here.
And if you look at the last, and we're at a little bit less than 6 months, but really we're probably at 3 months because it took me a little time to get started, right? So in 3.5, 4 months, let's say, we have about $16 trillion. There's never been anything like that in history. You can go for years and they didn't have numbers like that. And if you look at the last administration, you had negative numbers. You didn't have positive numbers.
Not only has there never been numbers like that, there are not numbers like that now. Trump is trying to imply that he has $16 trillion. Now the debt is what, $36 trillion? Trump is trying to claim that somewhere he's pulled $16 trillion out of the ether. It's making it up. Dark Bushida, you have Putin is master diplomat, and he is not a fool. Absolutely true. If anything, Russia finds Trump negotiating, insulting. Agreed. They're being consummate diplomats, but yes, agreed. And bring my man on. We are joined. The man himself, KJ No. KJ No, he is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He was contributor to the book, Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It is now available at iacenter.org. You can also check out KJ on the Breakthrough News Network on the China Report. KJ, my man, how are you doing this morning? How you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. Thank you. Good to be with you.
It's good to be with you too. There is a fascinating story that is coming out right here. So this is a quote by Xi Jinping. And some of these quotes are fascinating, just in their implications. So President of China, Xi Jinping, meeting Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov of Russia, made some remarks about the United States and Europe today. Xi Jinping said, quote, China and Russia are not building an alliance. We're building a new global reality. The West must either adapt or disappear. He continued, the West wants others to live in perpetual poverty so that its banks can remain rich. Well, that's true. He then made the point of saying, we do not seek to rule the world, only to liberate it from those who believe they own it. That's a wow statement, KJ. Before we step into that, give me your take on it. First, is that quote accurate? Second, wow, if it is.
Yeah, so I think that certainly it is a powerful statement. I mean, when he says that they're creating a new global reality, I think that's very much true. That is what they are doing. Do they want the world to be? Do they want to resist the fact that the West wants to keep the world in perpetual poverty? Yes, absolutely. This is the state of affairs. and he's saying that they want to liberate the world. So that is very true. I actually have not seen the readouts from the Chinese that have said that. So
Fair.
yeah.
Okay.
But
this is floating around in social media, and this was a report that I saw in an article. So let's put a caveat around it until we see the readout.
Well, I would say that President Xi Jinping believes these things. I think that it's fair to assume that this is what drives him, but we don't have explicit statements. So I think it needs to be given a little bit more time to see if that is actually what he said. Traditionally, that's not the language that he usually uses.
Exactly.
And it's certainly not the usual language of the Chinese foreign ministry. So I think on the one hand, yes, I think that this is what drives President Xi Jinping. And on the other hand, let's wait for the direct affirmation, the direct readouts from the foreign ministry.
That's fair. That's fair. Because when I kept trying to validate it. And when you see stuff on social media, it's just on social media. And I was looking for the actual readout of the quote where he was saying it. So like I said, let's put caveats around it until we can verify that is indeed the actual quote. If it is.
Yeah. I mean, what he said at the SCO was that, and this is from the horse's mouth, this is a readout. President Xi Jinping stressed that in the face of a turbulent and changing international landscape, the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, must stay focused, remain confident, act efficiently, and play a more proactive role in injecting greater stability and positive energy in the world. It should remain true to its founding mission and serve as the torchbearer of the Shanghai spirit, should take mutual trust and mutual benefit as the foundation of cooperation, equality, and consultation, and to respect diversity of civilizations as a means to promote harmony and inclusiveness, and the pursuit of common development as the path to achieve win-win results and prosperity. So this is the general tone that I'm seeing out of the SCO meeting. I don't see, and that's kind of in alignment with the general language that he uses. He also says the SCO should improve mechanisms to address security threats and challenges, strengthen security barriers, and meet the people's aspirations for a peaceful and secure life, etc. That's not trivial. I mean, that amounts to similar to what is being said. The other statements almost sound like a kind of a summary of this statement. He also says the SCO should firmly oppose hegemony, power politics, and bullying, and promote a more equal and orderly multipolar world, uphold and unite and lead the global South, and build a more just and equitable global governance system, and pool great strength to build a community with a shared future for mankind. He's essentially saying that this is the new global reality. So, and that we're working to liberate the world. But once again, those language is not what I'm seeing.
Wow. What does a new security reality mean in this context?
The new security reality means that small countries do not get bullied, that they work together to resist hegemony. They resist the US's, treating them as weaker nations, whether, the strong do what they will and the weak suffer what they must. So that could involve, most certainly, it involves at the most basic level, logistical, trade, economic alliances, but also, technical partnerships, and to a certain extent, where it's necessary, some kind of military technical cooperation. I think these things are all being built out. I think the lesson of Iran is very present on their minds. I think they're very, very aware of what's going on in Palestine. China is also a member of the Hague Group, the 30 nations that are getting together to decide that they're going to take much more concrete action against the Israeli genocide. And I think also this kind of constant encroaching and escalation against China is also very present and visible. Remember, Australia and Japan have just been told by Elbridge Colby, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. He has said, essentially, you need to pick sides. Are you with us or against us, against China? So I think that is really an important development. He's literally said to them, are you going to join us in war against China? And both Japan and Australia have been non-committal. And this is very stunning, because on the one hand, you have Elbridge Colby saying, are you going to go to war over Taiwan Island, which is a country that we are kind of on the fence whether we are going to commit or not, right? Because the US technically still has a one China policy. And on the other hand, it's, China has absolutely no reason to attack Taiwan. It wants peaceful reunification. It's just a family affair. So as far as they're concerned, or as far as both Australia and Japan are concerned, this is a pure hypothetical for something that the US is not committed to, at least on paper. And yet they're asking for a direct black and white commitment from Japan and Australia. This signals how desperate the United States is, how desperate it is to go to war, that it wants these countries to, quote unquote, pre-invest, even before, the US itself is willing to make some kind of black and white statement. So it's a mess. It's all over the place, but it signals desperation.
Why do you think they put that out there now? Because it's weird. It's not like the United States is gearing up or is, let's say, in a position to attack China. It's not like China is making any moves on Taiwan, and it even sounds weird to say make a move considering it's the same country. Well, why do you think that this is the moment that the U.S. is trying to get this kind of black and white commitment from these countries? And I thought it was South Korea, but maybe I got that wrong. You're probably right. It was Japan and thing. I think it's interesting that it wasn't South Korea, to be honest.
Yes, I think it's perfectly understandable that you would have thought it was South Korea. And there's some speculation as to whether South Korea was also part of this press ganging. On the one hand, it could be that the U.S. already has control over South Korea's military. It has, quote unquote, wartime operational control over South Korea's military. And currently in the House or in the Senate, in the legislature, in the U.S. legislature, there's a move to prevent any return of operational control. Remember, the Koreans have been trying to get back operational control for 3 decades now. And Barack Obama actually promised, we would return it, 2015, et cetera, et cetera. None of it happened. The U.S. does not want to give up control over South Korea's troops. They have, yes.
That's just on paper. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's just paper. That's not real life. Like the U.S. could go to South Korea and say, hey, we want you to fight the Chinese, and they could say, F off. What stops them?
Because the South Korean military, to a very large extent, responds to the U.S. military. Militaries have a chain of command, and soldiers do what they're told to. So, for example, the South Korean military has been known to go directly against the wishes of the South Korean president. Let me give you an example. Moon Jae-in was the president just before Yoon Suk-yeol, and there's the missile defense system, the THAAD missile system, which the vast majority of Koreans were opposed to installing on Korean soil. the US wants the THAAD missile system in Korea because it's strategically tremendously important. It does two things. One is it undermines China's nuclear deterrent. And the second thing is if you take the radar and you put it into a surveillance mode, it can scan China to about 2,000 to 3,000, over 3,000 kilometers inland. So essentially turns the entire, it's like a peeping Tom right up against your window. It renders the entire Chinese continent transparent. So the Chinese have been deadly opposed to this. And of course, the Korean government was deadly opposed to this. That absolutely, it was a no-go. We don't want this. And the legislature said that, we're not going to fund this because, of course, as the US does this, that is, $1 billion system. They don't want to fund it. And so what the Korean military did was they decided that they were going to place it inside a golf course. This is the Lotte Sky Hill golf course. Okay, why is it on a golf course? Yes, because it's on a high hill, which gives it, it's an unobstructed view. And secondly, they didn't want to have to buy anything. They didn't want to have to buy any land because buying land would involve an appropriation from the South Korean legislature, which the South Korean legislature said that they were opposed to. So they didn't have any way of buying land. So the military simply did kind of a backdoor deal with a South Korean conglomerate with which they were very, very close, Lotte. And then they placed it on this luxury golf course. And here's the kicker, Jamal. The ruling imperial elite, they really love their golf courses, right? They really love their golf. Biden and Trump, when they had the presidential debate, it was all about golf, right? I mean, they really, really love their golf courses. If they decide to turn a golf course into a missile zone, into a missile platform, that they're really, really serious about war because they don't like to give anything up. So anyway, they turned Lotte Sky Hill into the THAAD missile launch platform. And so they got that land essentially for free without any undergoing any government appropriations. And then when Moon Jae-in came in, when he was elected, he said, I oppose the THAAD. We're going to put a freeze on the importation of THAAD missile batteries in South Korea. Everybody stop what you're doing. Don't do it. And do you know what happened?
They did it anyway.
They did it anyway. They just brought it in. They ignored the order from the commander-in-chief of the country. And once the THAAD was in place, Moon Jae-in said, why did you do this? This is a directive. This is a direct order from me, your president. And do you know what the Korean military said? They said, we had an agreement. We had an agreement with the U.S. military. And part of that agreement was to not even let you know. Therefore, we had a non-disclosure agreement with the U.S. military. Therefore, we couldn't let you know. Okay, that's
outrageous.
That's
outrageous.
It is outrageous. If you look at American, security experts, they say this is the most unprecedented. Not that, but the fact that the United States still has operational control over South Korean troops is the most unprecedented surrender of sovereignty of any country in the world. No other country, no other sovereign state has its military controlled by another country. But the US has control over the South Korean military. Now, some of them say, and the US says, this is only wartime operational control. Okay, now that is a silly statement. First, because OPCON only applies in war. OPCON is only applied in war because the term operations really refers to war operations. So it's a pleonasm. You're repeating yourself. It's like saying wartime war war control,
Right.
say operation, what was Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Iraqi Liberation, Operation Rolling Thunder? What are these? These are all wars, right? The war on Iraq was called Operation Iraqi Liberation, OIL for short, right?
Mm-hmm.
Operation means a war operation. So when they say we only have wartime operational control, it's a pleonasm. They're just repeating themselves. They're saying the same thing twice. The thing is that generally, OPCON is usually a very, very temporary thing. It only happens either directly during war, or it happens during military exercises, usually in preparation for war. And it's usually a temporary thing. And when the war ends, operational control is returned. Well, South Korea signed over operational control to the United States in 1950, in July of 1950, and they have never gotten it back. They want it back. They've demanded back control of their own military. And the US has always said, no, wait. One more thing. You have to do one more thing. Otherwise, we can't return it to you. And in the meantime, the South Korean machine has been a killing machine for the United States. In the Vietnam War, the Koreans sent 320,000 troops to Vietnam. After 1972, there were more South Korean troops in Vietnam than there were American troops themselves. So South Korea doesn't have control over its own military. During the Afghan war, the South Koreans were right in there, right after the Americans. Almost as soon as the Americans had landed, South Koreans were in there, under the radar, hundreds of South Korean officers, etc. So South Korea doesn't have, the only fig leaf that the United States has given is to say, oh, we don't have total operational control. We only have wartime operational control. And really the reason for that, the reason why they say that we only have wartime operational control is that in 1980, 1980, the South Korean troops committed a massacre of South Korean protesters. This was the city of Gwangju, 1980 May. They killed hundreds, possibly thousands of protesters who were opposed to the military dictatorship. And all of those troops who went down there would have been authorized to do so by the US, because the US has operational control over them. And so in order to kind of put a fig leaf and to disavow these types of incidents, these types of massacres, the US says, we don't control them during peacetime. We only control them during war. Well, South Korea is at war. It is still technically at war with North Korea. And secondly, as I said before, the job of the military is war. So when you say that you only control it during wartime, that's like saying I only control the car when it's on the street. When it's in the garage, it's your car. But the moment it's on the street, the moment it's being driven, it's my car. Well, then it's not your car, Jamal. If the only time you ever get to control it is when it's in the garage, you're the maintenance guy, right? You're changing oil and maintaining the tires. But as far as
it's military, the entire point of it is to be used.
To fight, to wage war. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like that's the only time it will be used, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, so it may be that it may be that the US is already assuming that it doesn't even need to force Korea to pick a side because it controls the South Korean military. Or it may be that they had put pressure on Lee Jae-myung, and according to, scuttlebutt, they said that Lee Jae-myung was opposed to it. But if he's opposed to it, he will not be for long as president. And Japan has said that, we don't respond to hypotheticals. And Australia also has been non-committal. But essentially, Colby has said, We want to know, he said to US allies, what would you do in the event of war over China? He phrases it, or he tries to frame it as quote unquote deterrence, but deterrence against what? China does not have war designs against Taiwan Island. It wants peaceful reunification with family, because Taiwan Island and the people on Taiwan Island are literally family.
I mean, KJ, even if China did, so what? Like, meaning the United States is effectively asking Australians and Japanese to be fed to the Chinese military. And more to the point, like even in a larger sense, China is a nuclear power. And I understand that the US believes that it can have this kind of nuclear war and win it. It's nonsense. Like the premise that we should go to nuclear war for Taiwan is as outrageous as we should go to nuclear war for Ukraine. Both of those premises are absurd. When I heard this and that they were asking Japan and Australia this, I was like, there's no way Australia and Japan are stupid enough to do this. It's one thing to say, okay, we want favors from the US. We want deals with the US. We want a financial relationship. We want to get weapons. Hell, we may even buy weapons from the US for it. That is different than, are you willing to feed Japanese and Australians to the Chinese wood chipper on behalf of the United States in order to fight for Taiwan? Okay, that's insane.
Well,
that's insane.
I mean, let's have a look at this. I agree with you. It's insane. And certainly neither the Japanese people nor the Australian people want themselves to be fed into the wood chipper. None of them want war with China. China is still their greatest trading partner. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants war, Jamal. I mean, we know this. I mean, ask anybody, do you want war with China? Of course, we all say it is insane. But let's think a little bit about history, because history informs the current situation. The Japanese have had a one-party state since 1955. This is the LDP. And there was only a kind of 2-year hiatus from this one-party state domination of the LDP since its formation. That was, if I'm not mistaken, Hatoyama, who was a socialist, and they got rid of him right away. He was cooled faster than you could sneeze. But the LDP is a coalition made from Japanese war criminals, unrepentant Japanese war criminals, and unrepentant Japanese industrialists, the corporations that fed the Japanese war machine, and the Japanese Yakuza, Japanese organized crime. This infernal triangle of war criminals, industrialists, and gangsters was brought together by the CIA, literally funded by the CIA. And then they were turned into the one-party state that controls Japan and essentially is a quisling government. I'm very impressed that they have said a few things in opposition to this, but let's stay the course and see what happens, because everything that Japan has done leading up to this moment has been to follow what the United States has been telling them to do. Most notably, Shinzo Abe essentially gutted the country's peace constitution and agreed that anywhere where Japan went to war, the U.S., anywhere where the U.S. went to war, Japan would also go to war as well. And traditionally, Japan has always served as a kind of a base, forward base for the United States. That's why you have, the vast number of troops. That's why you have, over 100 military bases in Japan and along the first island chain, the Ryukyu Islands, the Okinawan Islands that surround China. And some of them are very, very close, very, very close to Taiwan Island. Yonaguni Island is practically, swimming distance. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but it is the closest, most southern island, and it's the closest to China. And the US has been placing Tomahawk missiles on these islands. Tomahawks are subsonic missiles. They're offensive missiles. Subsonic missiles means that they're slow moving. They're not used for counter battery attacks. They are offensive weapons. So they place Tomahawks on them. Tomahawks are nuclear dual use platforms. So they put tactical nukes on them. And here's the kicker, Jamal. They have been placing these Tomahawks and missiles on golf courses. Once again, the ruling imperial elite loves their golf. If they are ready to sacrifice golf courses, remember the ruling imperial elite never make any sacrifices. But if they're willing to give up golf courses in order to put military platforms on them, you know that they're dead serious. They're deadly serious. And the nuclear piece, let me read for you what Elbridge Colby has said. Now, once again, Elbridge Colby is the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. He came out of the Center for New American Security, which is the neocons think tank. It's the neocon think tank. This is where 18 of Biden's top administration officials came out of, including all the neocons. All the neocons came out of the Center for New American Security, as did Elbridge Colby. And Eli Ratner is currently in Elbridge Colby's institute, which is the Marathon Institute. Same thing. They're all a network of neocon think tanks. But he has said, and I quote, this is the testimony before the Armed Services Committee over 10 years ago. He's saying, we're entering a period of significant and possibly dramatic change in both the geopolitical and military technological spheres. The US is likely to confront more significant challenges to its interests from countries like China. This will have major implications for US defense strategy, but also for a nuclear deterrent. Accordingly, the US needs to adapt its nuclear policy and posture. The United States should adapt its nuclear forces to be able to fight a limited nuclear war more effectively. And then he writes in Foreign Affairs, if you want peace, prepare for nuclear war. In his recommendations at CNAS for U.S. nuclear strategy, says, in a situation in which the U.S. has lost the conventional advantage, U.S. nuclear weapons should play a vital role in bringing a war the United States and its allies are losing to a tolerable close. Let me say that again. A war that the U.S. is losing, the U.S. should use nuclear weapons in order to bring it to a tolerable close. In other words, and we know that all the war games show that the U.S. would lose in a war against Taiwan. So essentially, we know that this is a foregone conclusion, that nuclear weapons will be used in a Taiwan engagement. And he says, once again, it will therefore be important for the United States to maintain the ability to forward deploy theater nuclear forces, et cetera, et cetera. The ideal U.S. nuclear force is capable of conducting effective limited nuclear operations while maintaining the ability to escalate to full-scale war if necessary. Effective nuclear war capability provides greater leverage and advantage for the United States. He's been saying this, Jamal, for 10 years. He wrote the U.S. National Defense Strategy, and he is currently the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. So, I mean, this is what they're planning. This is what they're cooking. This is what they are banking on.
But these people are lunatics. Because it's that is shocking paperwork. Tactical nukes are nukes. And the moment that you get into a tactical nuclear war, you enter a regular nuclear war. It's not like, okay, let's just keep this to tactical nukes. That's not the way countries are going to think. Any country, whether it's China or Russia, is going to have the exact same policy that if they're losing, they will employ nukes in order to level the. I don't doubt what you're reading. It's insane. Like there's a level of sociopathy associated with that is breathtaking. And it is blisteringly insane that like he is postulating that when we lose a war, because we will lose that war, that we can employ tactical nukes to leverage and balance it out. And China will also stay the tactical nukes. Okay, what gives you that thought process that China would allow themselves to lose a nuclear war with you? Like there's no way to win that. I guess that's the thing I always come to. When I was having a conversation with Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich said hi, by the way. And Jeff was like, he says, yeah, I don't think Australia will be fed to the Chinese on behalf of the United States. Okay, maybe not. But what they are planning, though, will go to nuclear war by definition. It has to. Either the U.S. is going to accept losing a conventional war, or the U.S. is not going to accept losing a conventional war, which would employ, as Colby is talking about, nukes. That's an astonishing document.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
astonishing
going
document.
back to Australia, we both know Jeff. I trust that Jeff has good insights and good knowledge about Australian political affairs. But once again, I like to look at the larger historical context. Like South Korea, Australia has always participated in U.S. wars. They are, after South Korea, they're probably the second or third down the list in terms of being press ganged and roped into U.S. wars. They've always fought on the behalf of the U.S. They were a huge contingent in the Vietnam War and also during the Afghan War. I mean, this came out more recently. Australian special forces, when they were deployed to Afghan, one of the first things that they would do is they would grab a young Afghan kid and then they would slice these kids' throats with knives. And this is what they called blooding. This was their kind of initiation ritual. You join, these special forces troops. This is how you show that you're one of the gang. Australians have been incredibly militaristic on the part of empire. They are a settler colonial state. And every time Australia has tried to do the right thing, guess what happens to their government?
Collapse.
They get couped, right? So 1974, Gough Whitlam, probably one of the best politicians certainly of Australia, certainly of the 20th century. He did all of the things that people associate with Australia that make us think that Australia is a decent country. Before that, it was like South Africa. It was a settler colonial state, just genociding the Aboriginal peoples left, right, and center, shooting them up for fun. And they are still a deeply, deeply oppressed group of people who have faced genocide. They have been almost, completely genocided, but they still resist and remain and survive in pockets. But Gough Whitlam said that he was going to return some lands to the Aboriginal peoples. He did that. He also, created, healthcare and free university education, the kind of things that you associate with a modern developed state.
Right.
And he also withdrew U.S. troops from Vietnam. And he wanted to get rid of U.S. bases. Okay, he wanted to get rid of the U.S. Listening post in Alice Springs. And when he did that, he was couped almost immediately. They got rid of his rear end as fast as they could by drawing on the reserve powers of the Queen of England, right? The Queen of England appoints, the Governor General of Australia, and the Governor General has these out of the pocket, under the table reserve powers that are not subject to any scrutiny. And the Governor General used these powers to kick Gough Whitlam out. And he was no longer present. I mean, technically, they shut off supply, funding for the government. And then that gave them the pretext. But the Governor General essentially fired Gough Whitlam, one of the most popular, one of the most decent, one of the most courageous politicians of the century, fired him overnight and placed in a U.S. stooge. Same thing happened with Kevin Rudd around 2008, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. He was not a pro-China Sinophile, but he refused to go along 100% with Barack Obama's pivot to Asia. The moment he did that, he was toast. They got rid of him right away, faster than you could, sneeze. And they put in Julia Gillard, who did everything the U.S. wanted. And so the U.S. has a way and a habit of cooing governments and leaders, especially in its tightly controlled vassals who do not go along with the program. So I sincerely hope that Jeff is right and that there is strong and real resistance. And perhaps, these leaders are not only listening to their people, their country, men and women, but also that they're listening and seeing, the way in which the political tide is turning. The U.S. is not a reliable partner. It is dangerous to be a friend of the United States, and it is deadly. It is dangerous to be an enemy of the United States, and it is deadly to be a friend. I hope they remember Kissinger's maxim, because that is what is going to happen to them very soon. They're going to be fed to the chipper soon, and it's going to be a nuclear chipper.
That's terrifying. Because I believe you, actually. I do think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get this, they want to pivot to Asia. And they believe in world primacy and that they're losing their primacy. And that part of the thing, in order to, it's almost as if the world is drifting in a direction. And the US is trying to swim against the tide. And it's getting more provocative in what it's trying to do in order to keep the tide from going in a particular direction. And it's like, it's going that way. Either you end the world or it goes that way. And you may have some people who are willing to say, okay, well, we're rather end the world. We want to break our toys so you can't play with our toys. That is terrifying. And yet that seems to be where these maniacs are going. KJ, I'll leave the last word.
Jamal, as I've said before, the ruling imperial elite would rather see the end of the world than the end of their supremacy, of their power and privilege. I believe that they are capable of waging both tactical and strategic nuclear war. And I hate to say this, I really, really hate it when those words issue from my mouth, because, it's a terrible thing to say. But I believe that we have to be aware of the risks. We have to be aware of what's at stake. And we also have to be aware of how the ruling imperial elite think. Look at what is happening in Palestine. Overt genocide before your eyes. Children being shot to death every single day. People, parents, fathers being killed simply for the crime of wanting to feed their families, right? Literally being baited and shot and genocide, live streamed before your eyes. And the Western press, they simply deny it. They say it is not happening. The genocide, these murders, these killings are not happening. That is how depraved they are. And they believe that if they believe that they can get away with this, that they're thinking of much, much worse and much, much more depraved things for a world war. I mean, this is, just in terms of scale, that is a small atrocity. They're capable of mass atrocities. And as I said, you and I have had this discussion back and forth. They would lose too. No. They would be killed too. No. They believe that they're going to survive. They have underground bunkers, or they believe that they're going to be raptured, and hence, the conflict of interest, or or they're already dead inside. They're already dead. They're zombies, nihilists. They don't believe in anything. They only believe in power. So that is what is so deeply, disturbingly dangerous and depraved about this current moment. Right now, just very recently, the U.S. Air Force and the Space Force together did the first department-level exercises in a generation. They haven't done these types of military exercises since the end of the Soviet Union. They're doing department-level exercises. These are war exercises that don't involve divisions or companies or even armies. They involve entire departments. That is to say, the entire Air Force and the entire Space Force. They're rehearsing the kind of interoperability for complete and total war against China. And they name China. This is for preparation for war against China. So the momentum, the acceleration towards total war is extraordinary. And so this is why, we have to sound the alarm. Even if it sounds alarmist, you have to understand whatever we are sounding the alarm about, they're probably, minions in the deep state thinking of much, much worse things than we could even imagine. That's why we resisted.
I'm sorry, Kisha. I'm sorry.
No,
Please.
We have to challenge, resist it while we can, while we still have the chance.
I'm of mind that this is the door we have to walk through. Because, look, from my point of view, the world needs. You would think that World War II was the example of, hey, this is not good. But it seems like for the world to get to whatever that next stage is, where it says hegemons are a problem, then you have to go through and play out why hegemons are a problem. And this is why. Meaning countries get into their minds. Like what you're saying is rather astonishing when you really think about it in a larger context. Nobody gave the world to anybody. Like the idea that somebody can take a patch of land and say, I own this land is pretty astonishing in and of itself. To say that I own this world and I'm willing to destroy it if I can't run it is a pretty profound thing to happen. But that is what is happening. The US is making the argument, and the West broadly is making the argument. 14% of the globe should be able to control the rest of the globe. And if it goes in a direction that we don't particularly like, we are willing to end it. That's profound. That's profound. Now the catch becomes, okay, does the world get to the point where it realizes this is not a place for world to be in? That whatever arrangement, whatever new norm that the world comes up with, kind of like where the world says rape is not great. So we don't want to have societies where rape is okay. Or where they would say pedophilia is not okay. Because, hashtag reasons. Like meaning the world does come to conclusions, or the world almost is united, says this is off the table, not because almost like because in an ingrained way. It's almost like you learn something in a sense as a planet. And I think we need to learn this thing of hegemons should be off the table. And I don't know what that looks like after the fact. Meaning, I don't know what the world looks like after the fact where it says this is no more hegemons, because I don't know how you do that. But the world would have to get to a position where it says, we went through this, this is bad, we can't do this. And I don't know how you get to that new norm without going through this. And hopefully, and to back up your point one day that you said we need to be able to get through it without destroying the world.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, so can we get through this moment? Can we go a few more years and get through this dark night so that we come out the other end without having destroyed the world? Well, I mean, Palestinians are being destroyed. There's, war and violence, intense violence that we don't see happening all around the world, certainly in Central Asia, in Western Asia. It's happening everywhere. It's just getting uglier and uglier. And as to the lessons to be learned from history. After World War I, people said, never again. We can't let this happen again. How could this happen? This is the end of, Western civilization. Well, I mean, as Oscar Wilde said, the West is the only region that went from barbarity to decadence without going through civilization in between.
Yeah.
We're back at the stage of pure barbarity. World War II, right? Again, right after World War I, what did we have? We had a few gestures, and then we had surrealism and Dadaism, right? The world makes no sense. A little bit of existentialism, and then bam, right again, World War II, right? And then after World War II, once again, never again. This is atrocious. We can never allow such things to happen again. We can never let the Holocaust happen again. It's happened before our eyes. As soon as World War II ended, what did the US do? It went into a genocidal war on the Korean Peninsula. 1 out of 5 Koreans were killed in the north. I mean, if you think Gaza is bad, and it is absolutely, unspeakably atrocious, think of Gaza amplified 900 times. That's what happened in Korea. That went on for 3 years. Okay. And then as soon as, Korea was ended, then you saw Vietnam, which was also a genocidal war. They literally had this thing called a body count, which was to count how many bodies they could kill. That was genocidal intent in scope and in execution. And then you also had Indonesia, where millions were killed. Even in Korea, before Indonesia, and this wasn't even a war, it was just a dirty war. They were killing people off by the millions. In Korea, starting 1948 and leading up to the Korean War, and after the beginning of the Korean War, they had the Border League massacres. Somewhere between 300,000 to 1.2 million Koreans were massacred because they were guilty of the crime of being leftist. This is how the empire works. Empire has been genocidal in intent from inception. It has always been genocidal. We're simply seeing its, the mask has dropped off. We're simply seeing its true nature. And it is, overtly committing genocide, and it is overtly preparing for genocide. It's overtly preparing for ecocide, for planetary ecocide. This is the thinking, the mindset of the ruling imperial elite. And they will cover that up with clever words like security doctrine and realism and, security strategy. But at core, it's, this unbridled desire, will to power, desire for complete and total control. And if they can't have it, they will destroy it. It's, as I said, it's the school shooter mode. It's that, broken relationship. If I can't have you, I'll destroy you. If you're not subjugated to me, I will kill all of you off, even if I end up dead myself. I think that is the kind of omnicidal, suicidal mode that the empire is in right now. And this is why it's so dangerous. And it's why we have to take a stand. We have to speak out. We have to do whatever little piece of leverage that we have to prevent further escalation and to tamper down ongoing wars and genocide. We have to speak up and take action.
KJ, you're fantastic. Thank you for this. Always appreciate you, man. Always appreciate you. KJ No, he's a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He's a contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator, once censored by Amazon. It's available at the iacenter.org. You can also find KJ on the Breakthrough News Network. That is a damn good one. Eugene Perrier, I used to work with him at the radio station. And he is, KJ is on the China Report. When is your next report coming out? Usually it comes out a day before you come on here.
Yes, it will be out next Tuesday. And my colleague Amanda does alternating Tuesdays. We alternate Tuesdays. So my show will be out next Tuesday. And in the meantime, if you're interested, I've also done a bunch of recent shows with Danny Haifong, along with Carl Jha and Brian Berletic. And I have also done some interviews for a channel called Empire Watch. Empire Watch. and they've done some, published some good stuff around, I guess, the omnicidal nature of the propaganda of empire. So,
Brian Berletic and Carl Shaw are fantastic. Brian, in fact, Brian is going to be on the show on Monday, and Carl is going to be on, I think, tomorrow. Both of them are great guests. So absolutely, I'll definitely check them out. KJ, thank you for this, man. You're fantastic. I appreciate you.
thank you, Jamal.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. We have come to the end. We've come to the end. Brian Berletic is ignorant of Chinese and Russia. What is this? Military power. No, I don't think he is. Look, just because somebody airs concerns, don't mean they're wrong about the concerns. What Brian does is Brian looks at documentation about what people, countries, and plans are. And you can see those plans being enacted. And you point out, say, hey, they're enacting these plans. This is fucking outrageous. And he's pointing out, like, these are what empire's trying to do. Now, I think I pointed out to him before, just because somebody writes it down doesn't necessarily mean they can do it. But you can see what Trump is doing step by step, this notion of extending and overextending Russia. Okay, that plan may work. The secondary part to that plan of Europe taking over may not. But he's not wrong for pointing out that, hey, this is what they're doing. And it is working in the context of overextending Russia. Now, Russia may not feed into it, China may not feed into it, but doesn't necessarily mean that that's not what they're trying to accomplish. So he's not wrong. He's been more right than many people. All right, I'm going to end this. I read through the chats already, so don't have to do it twice. You guys have a fantastic evening. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Be safe, be kind to the degree that you can be kind. Have a good one all. Bye-bye.